o'clock. If we can get everybody's attention, we'll go ahead and get the meeting started here. I just want to thank everybody for attending our first annual meeting for Central Coast Community Energy. Terrific lunch and an opportunity to visit for those that made it in person, and for those that are tuning in, we're just glad you're here and you can be a part of the fun as we really celebrate many of our accomplishments. We'll go ahead and get started with roll call. So let's go ahead and call the meeting to order.
Thank you, Chair. Starting with the Operations Board. Director Duddle.
Here.
Blair.
Here.
Bodum. Absent. Bronson.
Here.
Pia.
Here.
Derflinger.
Here.
Espinoza.
Here.
Huffaker.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Mendez.
Here.
McKee.
Here.
Miller. Absent. Miyasato.
Here.
Rurig. Absent. Stillwell.
Here.
Vice Chair Goldstein. Absent. Chair Palacios.
Here.
And for the Policy Board, Director Adams.
Here.
Brooks. Absent. Carbone.
Here.
Estrada. Absent. Kosmicki.
Here.
Lee. Absent. Marks.
Here.
Myers. Absent. Patino. Patino, you're on mute. Okay, I'll note her presence. Richards.
Here.
Tomlinson. Here. Velasquez. Anna. Absent. Velasquez Ignacio. Or Rick Perez. Absent. Vice Chair Williams.
Here.
Sorry, I skipped over you. I apologize. Director McPherson
Here.
and Chair McShane.
Here.
And I also can note the presence of Director Miller. And we have a quorum.
Great. Thank you very much.
Chair Patino is here.
Okay.
And
you.
Brooks.
Great. Thank you.
And Patino.
Got it. Noted. Thank you. Why don't we go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Director Tomlinson, if you'll lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
And justice for all.
Okay, so this meeting's a little different in the sense that it's an annual meeting, and I think we'll have a lot of opportunity to learn, to ask questions of staff, tremendous reporting on a number of successes over the last number of years we've been around. I do just want to acknowledge J.R. Killigrew, because he's going to keep us on time and on task, and he's going to help as we move things along. There'll be some opening remarks, and then we do have a keynote speaker for our annual meeting, which our past chair, McPherson, will do the introduction for. So just, on the topic of 2021, we have a lot to be proud of. I mean, many of us remember when this agency just got started, and it was an uphill battle. It almost didn't happen. And thanks to Director McPherson's leadership, it wasn't just a single county or a single city. It became a federation of 5 counties, many cities. It's amazing when government can work together. Next month, 40,000 more customers will be enrolled. And then the early part of 2022, we'll have the city of Buellton, and the agency will go from a growth mode to management and success mode in ways I think we've never seen before. And that's really an important transition. We want to recognize the staff, the community members, our leadership team, and certainly our customers in making that happen. As I think has been noted in some of our meetings, we're the most successful CCA by a long shot in the entire state. We're making more investments in green, renewable energy than even the IOUs out there, and I think we're going to hear more about that. I have to say, Tom and the staff, we couldn't have done it without you. There's tremendous trust there. We've taken the agency from uncharted territory to really a place of leadership amongst the state and other CCAs, and I think there's a lot to be said about that. The Ops Board has not been left out of any easy path either. To Carlos and others that have been involved at the Ops Board level, if it weren't for our city managers going above and beyond, we probably would bear a lot more risk and be in a worse spot. Looking ahead, there's a lot of interest in programs, and that's where I see our chair of the CAC, Norm Groot, Seth, and others that are very committed to seeing to it that we really lead in that capacity as well. It become a reality. I just want to also really say how much interest there is on the part of our customers. We're hearing from them every day, and it's always been an asset. From the very get-go, you want customers that give you feedback, that are passionate about your product. And I can't say that about all our cities and our counties all the time. Sometimes it's just the bad news club. Although some folks may say, hey, Tom or some of the staff don't have the expertise in programs, that's okay. We've got John Greaser. We've got the right people on the team, and that's what Tom has done from the get-go. Doesn't mean we're not going to challenge one another. It doesn't mean we're not going to tell you that we don't agree or change what the staff may recommend. It just means that in the end, the customer gets what's right. And I just have to say, as we move into a new chapter for the agency, from growth and expansion to running the place, there's going to be a lot of exciting developments for programs. And I know in this meeting today, there's interest there and there'll be discussion. I have to acknowledge, certainly as I know Tiffany's here today too, our grade A rating amongst credit agencies is something not to be looked past. That's a real success. I don't think many CCAs or any have really had that, not to mention that we continue to lead when it comes to green energy and acquisition. All the fruits of this hard work are being really born now. And as an agency, I think today's meeting is framed by where have we been, what successes can we celebrate, and where do we want to go? And we want to have that conversation. I think it'll be very open and spirited. And that's just it. Just for fun, there was a few key stats that I asked JR about. Over $1.2 billion in power supply contracts have been procured by Central Coast Community Energy, $24 million plus in energy programs investments, and $12 million plus in state funding, grant dollars brought to the agency for EV infrastructure and more. So there's a lot to be proud of. Again, today is a workshop. Today's an opportunity to engage, to learn more. We have a lot of new board members still in the last year. New cities and agencies represented here. So this is a tremendous opportunity to learn. And as I know I've shared with past Chair McPherson on a number of occasions, this is one of the coolest agencies. It really is. There isn't a dull moment, and we're really making a difference. So I hope everybody really has as much excitement and really a positive outlook as I do. So we have a few other celebrities amongst us, including our Ops Board Chair and our CAC Board Chair. And, for some folks that are relatively new, I think it'd be helpful to hear what is it the Ops Board does, how's the Ops Board doing, and what's the outlook from the chair of our Operations Board, and that's County Administrator Carlos Palacios. So, Carlos?
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair McShane. It's wonderful to be here. Welcome to everybody. This is really incredibly inspiring to me to see the agency come to this point. That Santa Cruz County was the founding agency of this organization. And to see it now reach this potential is amazing. It's exciting to see Central Coast Community Energy advance local control of our energy needs invest in local energy programs, and further our commitments to clean energy, which allows us as the city and county leaders of 33 Central Coast Community Energy member agencies an opportunity to further collaborate and enhance the value of this agency across the Central Coast. You know, when Supervisor McPherson first came to me with this idea many years ago, I was a brand new CAO, and I thought I agreed with Chair McShane, this is the coolest idea ever. And I said, Chair McPherson, let's just do it in Santa Cruz County, because I'm a former city manager, and I don't want to be dealing with 22 Monterey city managers, 18 cities. So I was one of them. And I said, it's just too complicated, too many relationships. All those mayors, all those city managers, all those city councils. Let's just stay in Santa Cruz County, keep it small, make it work. And I advised him, and like a good elected leader, he overruled me. And he decided, no, the bigger vision was more important. We need to bring Monterey County in, San Benito County in, and we need to have a bigger vision than I had at that time. And you know, what I see is I do see the wisdom of Chair McPherson's vision, because along with all those complicated relationships comes relationships that bring value and experience to the agency. And now, instead of seeing all 33 different problems, there's 33 different potentials out there. And so I see the wisdom in that. And I see that the most important thing as we go from startup, which really we've been in, sort of a startup mode, and now to, and then we were in a growth mode, and now we're going to enter into, I think, reaching our potential. And we're going to start even doing cooler programs, cooler successes. But the really key thing is that we've got to build relationships with each other. Because you know that those of you who are mayors and those of you who are city managers, the key to getting anything done is one-on-one relationships with one another, trust. And so that's what I would admonish everyone and hope that everyone continues to do. I'm sad that we're not all able to be here because of the circumstances, but I totally understand it. Hopefully in the future we will be able to come all together, and we really need to do what we're good at, which is build relationships of trust with one another. With all these different counties now involved, all the different cities, it's really crucial to our success in the future. So I'm glad that everyone's here and everyone who's attending, and let's continue to get to know, I know so many of you folks because I was a city manager for a couple decades here in Watsonville, and so I know a lot of folks already, and I know Supervisor McPherson knew pretty much every mayor in the whole region. But we've got to continue to build on that and continue to build those relationships as we go forward, because that's going to be the key to the success, if we can build relationships of trust. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Chair McShane, and thank you, everyone, for being here.
Thank you very much, Chair Palacios. And again, the relationship's awesome. I mean, where else would you learn about the new solar panels on City Hall at Goleta, or, really truly appreciate the fires in Scotts Valley, the rebuilding process, all those permits that I'm sure you're having fun with. There's a lot to that, and what comes of it. Think of what we faced with the fires and how this agency was able to install funding for emergency backup energy at public locations, and that's been taken advantage of. If it's not in SLO, it's throughout the service area. So a lot of success there. Not all CCAs are set up the same. We have the city managers that play the key role on the operations board, and then the policy board made up of each and every one of us, and then a very diverse group, many of which are in the audience today, that make up the Community Advisory Council. And our chair, the executive director of the Monterey County Farm Bureau and fearless leader for our Community Advisory Committee is here with us today. So Norm Groot, how about a few good words, sir?
Thank you, and two of the operations and policy board directors. It's on. Are you not hearing me?
Try now.
Try now?
There we go.
There we go. Okay. So to the policy board members and the operations board members, it's nice to be here in our annual meeting today. And particularly thank you to Chair Palacios and Chair McShane for providing the forward progress of this agency in its short 3.5 years of operational lifespan. Getting some feedback. And for also highlighting the important role that each member agency has played along the way and into the future here, whether they were the first to join or whether they were the last. It's a pleasure to be here at the first annual meeting of Central Coast Community Energy, and as the chair of the Community Advisory Council, I welcome all the public members who may be participating virtually also. Over the past 3.5 years, our Community Advisory Council has played an important role for 3CE's growth and success. I'm honored to share a few and a little bit about the role that we as a CAC have played so far. We've grown from a group of 11 to now 15 council members, all of whom volunteer their time on behalf of 3CE and the communities and customers that we serve. Community engagement and following the vision of that community is at the heart of what the Community Advisory Council does. And we've been able to accomplish that over these last 3.5 years. In collaboration with staff here, the CAC has played an important role in creating a trusted and engaged conduit for the diverse communities that our agency currently has. Additionally, the CAC worked collaboratively with 3CE staff on a number of initiatives this year, including the design and prioritization of our energy programs, helping with the selection of the education grants, as well as developing an outreach plan to better understand and how best to serve our underprivileged communities. We acknowledge the commitments this agency has made to the community it serves. The recommendations made by the CAC help to keep the community's needs in step with the agency's operations and programs, and I am confident that the CAC will take a bigger step towards engaging and working with the community to bring additional opportunities to inform our future programs. I thank the individual CAC members for their commitment and their time to this agency, and thank the Policy Board and the Operations Board members and the 3CE staff for the opportunity to represent our respective communities and the stakeholder groups to maximize the value and the benefits of this incredible agency. So I look forward to what 3CE will be doing in the future and the incredible pathway of success and how we can continue that in the future years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Norm, and thank you for your service. You know, not too long ago, I remember being invited to a startup CCE visit in Orange County, and you know, it's amazing how much folks in this community lean on our organization and how we were founded and how we're set up and how we're able to succeed. And I think for that purpose, we were hoping to record this and actually offer it as something that can be shared with other CCEs that want to see what else we're doing. So we'll be on our best behavior, won't we, JR? You know, our founding past chair, McPherson, offered to give a little bit of background and perspective as, you know, he did play a role in that heavy lift to get us off the ground, and we'll also be introducing our keynote speaker today. So, Director McPherson, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for those kind words, too, and to you, too, Carlos. I mean, what else are you supposed to say as my CAO, right? So whatever. But, no, I remember when we started this, we were going through, I think, 150 meetings, myself and one of my analysts, as many of you know, Jenny Johnson, who's been fantastic in this whole operation. I want to thank Steve for the opportunity to speak today. I want to give some comments regarding the history of the Central Coast Community Energy, or 3CE. And as most of you know, Santa Cruz County was the lead agency in forming what was then known as Monterey Bay Community Power. And yes, Carlos is right. We were going to do it just in the county. And I said, no, let's go tri-county. And people said, you're nuts, but we did it. And we set out to form a joint powers agency that made sense for the region. And I'd been fortunate enough to represent that region when I was in the state legislature, so that helped a lot into knowing some people as we went along. And of course, we wanted to have an environmentally sound agency to help us reach our greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. And right now, we are on track to provide 100% green energy 15 years ahead of the state goal. And each and every one of you should be proud of that. My applause goes to you because we've all been in this together. We aim to form an agency that provided reasonable rates and contributed back to the community with complementary energy programs. But first and foremost, we knew that we needed to form a solid business, one that could weather the test of time and continual challenges from regulations, legislations, market fluctuations, and difficulties with the investor-owned utilities mandated to deliver the energy we purchase. And I'm extremely proud of the agency we have built and the staff and the board members who have been the backbone of that work. And ladies and gentlemen, we have the best CEO in the state of California and in the nation of California, Tom Hibachi. So I think in 3CE, we have formed an organization of 33 member agencies within a 5-county footprint from Santa Cruz to Santa Barbara that makes us the largest geographic CCA or CCE in the state. And we serve 95% of the electricity customers now, which is with a really truly diversified agency. The annual budget exceeds $350 million, most of which goes to providing green energy, but also reinvest into our communities. And in the past year, we've had some differences of opinion among those who serve on the Community Advisory Committee and even among members of the 2 governing boards. Recently, we even changed a vote. Does anybody remember the nuclear attributes not so long ago? And we've had our share of close votes on items critical of the future of the 3CE. But it's healthy to have a robust conversation, but it's also imperative that we remember that we are running a public benefit agency, public benefit business, and the decisions we make must balance the need to keep business financially healthy. I'm strongly supportive of investing in the communities we serve with great programs, but you also see me support conservative business management decisions as well, especially in keeping our operational reserves on a strong footing and our rates reasonable. We promised this region that we would serve our communities better than the incumbent investor-owned utility, and we are keeping that promise. I am thrilled to be here today to support rates, programs, and budget that will keep us on track to realize the original vision we had in forming Monterey Bay Community Power, now 3CE, of course, that has grown into a vibrant Central Coast community energy with 400,000 customers. So I just want to say, yeah, it's been a lot of work and energy. It's been a lot of work and energy for a lot of people to make this success, and we want a robust discussion on issues as we're going to have in these next 2 days. But I just want to say thank you to everybody for your willingness to come in and be energetic in supporting 3CE. So thank you very much. Now it's my pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Senator John Laird. John is not a stranger to most of you. He has endless energy and work ethic that makes friends everywhere he visits. He was elected to the state Senate last November and serves on 11 legislative committees, and we've talked about that. I don't know how you do it, John, and you don't either, I think, but whatever, you're doing it. And that's almost unheard of, really, to be on that many committees, and that just shows that people have the respect for you in so many areas. John has served as Secretary of Natural Resources under Governor Brown for 8 years, and I think he was the only director of a major agency to serve the complete 8-year term of Governor Jerry Brown. So that's a real compliment too. And previous to that, he represented the Monterey Bay region in the state assembly for 6 years. As trustee of Cabrillo College for 8 years, and a council member from the former mayor of the city of Santa Cruz for 9 years, John has made public service his calling since graduating from UCSC in 1972. It is my deep honor and to welcome my good friend, Senator John Laird, as our keynote speaker today. Thank you, John, for being here.
Well, thanks to all of you, and thanks, Bruce, for that great introduction. I think if we were to write a book about our friendship over the last 40 years, it would be like 100 years of solitude in all the different things that we have done together. And I see a lot of friends here. It's great to be here, and I know that both Bruce and Doss Williams are here, and they understand what it's like to be coming out at the end of session and to just be surviving a meeting around the clock, which we just did for a few weeks. And I've watched this organization as it started, from Ginny Johnson briefing me right at the beginning to various bumps and gains, and it's phenomenal where you are. It's actually phenomenal when Steve McShane refers to it as cool and refers to the chair of the advisory committee or the ops as celebrities. Now that has got to be unique to any agency, but the fact that you've contracted for 800 megawatts of renewables resources and 250 megawatts of storage is unbelievable. And there's a reason that you are the largest, and there's a reason that you have expanded, and there's a region that people look to this organization from around the state as a roadmap of how to do it. And I think right now we're in a very difficult time with regard to the climate. The fires this year, every year, we think that we've seen the most. And then this year, the first two fires that have ever burned all the way over the Sierra have happened. The drought that we're in the second year of this drought, we're in worse shape than we were in the fourth year of the drought in the last decade. And I visited Lakes Nacimiento and San Antonio a few weeks ago, and they're at something like 9 and 14% of normal. And I see Councilmember Marks on from San Luis Obispo. I was there last year, the day after it was clocked at 120 degrees in San Luis Obispo. And we have the international report that really says that we are just in extreme danger from not being able to get a hold of this in climate change. And so the fact that you're 15 years ahead of the goal, the fact that we're doing this all is a piece of what we have to do to respond. And the Central Coast is really an example, not just your organization, but I was at the Vistra Energy battery storage plant at Moss Landing a few weeks ago. And they have just taken every nook and cranny and filled it with battery storage. And there's a second one that PG&E has over the fence. And now the MOU's been signed for Morro Bay to do the largest one in the world. And we are looking, the federal government has expedited the offshore wind process. And there's two places in California that are the sites, one off of Humboldt and the other off the Central Coast at Morro Bay. And so it's up to us to decide how to continue to make that happen. And there was a very interesting moment when I was having the tour in Moss Landing. And it was somebody that had worked at Moss Landing for 40 years that gave me the tour. And so he was there for 30 years of fossil fuel use. And now he walked me through the batteries, and he knew every fact, every level of power of the batteries, how it fit together, how it went on the grid, how it all worked. And it was really interesting because we talk about transition, but here was the transition to sort of a cleaner energy future embodied in just one person who'd lived in the fossil fuel world and now was doing so well in the new battery storage plant. And so we on the Central Coast are really moving in a way that around the state they're looking and seeing what's happening with energy and what more we have to do. And at the state level in this session, we passed Assembly Bill 525. I floor managed it in the Senate. David Chu was the lead author from San Francisco. And it really jumpstarts wind power, offshore wind power, sets a goal, really prioritizes it for the state. And it got out with virtually unanimous support in both houses. And when I was at Resources and when I was chair of the Ocean Protection Council, we did a workshop on offshore wind. and there were critics, and there were all these reasons why it couldn't happen. And there were all these local governments that thought it was not a good idea. And now in San Luis Obispo, it really looks like it's moving ahead. Some of the local governments are the champions for it, and we have a lot of work to do. But it is something that might pick up the jobs and pick up the economic power that exists in Diablo Canyon not long after it closes, and continue the transition along the Central Coast. So all those things we really have to work on. And in the budget, we had a unique budget this year. I'm sure Bruce and Doss will testify to that. I had never seen it in my years as budget chair in the Assembly. But we put in $735 million general fund over 2 years, and it'll be subject to subsequent legislation to support pre-commercial long-duration storage projects to really make the difference, whether it's at food production or other facilities in the transition. And I would be sure that there's people on this call that have ideas on how it might work for them or their area or something in their area. And as this moves for legislation to implement it, I'm going to want to be in touch to make sure that whatever the needs of the Central Coast are in this are represented in whatever legislation implements it. And we also have additional general fund for transmission planning, environmentally responsible development of the offshore wind, the first steps. There's an appropriation to take, and for emergency planning and preparedness as it applies to energy. So we really, on the budget level, moved it ahead this year to try to match the needs that we have and what we have to do. But the real challenge is the next steps. And in the budget, we did certain things for adaptation, because no matter how we get on top of emissions over time, whether it's fire or water or the sea levels rising, we are going to have to adapt until we get control there. And we had significant investment in fuels management and fire prevention, significant investment in water, trying to deal with the drought and the way the climate has changed what we're doing with water. We have on the governor's desk local collaboratives to deal with sea level rise and bring people together on a regional basis to take the next steps for what we have to do in planning and implementation there. And next year, the Air Resources Board, CARB, does its scoping plan. And they do this every few years to really say, based on the legislation, based on the science that is done, what will be the practical programs that we undertake to meet the goals that we have on climate and renewables. And so we didn't pass a major piece of legislation this year other than the wind energy and some on natural and working lands and quantifying what we want out of that. But this process will really tell us what we need to do on the ground to implement all those things. And there is a chance that next year we will have legislation that informs that process. Further goals, certain things we can do. I think our big problem right now is the largest share of emissions in California is from the transportation sector. And that is the hardest challenge to reach, is trying to figure out how we're going to lower emissions there over time. There was a goal set by Governor Brown of 5 million electric cars in the next decade. And that, what it would take in the infrastructure and the transition to get there is monumental. But we have set goals and we have reached them. We did AB 32 in 2006, which took the Kyoto Accords and put them into law in California and said we would go back to our emissions level of 1990 and 2020, which lowered it by 11 or 12 or 13%. And we meant it, and we met it. And in 2011, Governor Brown signed that we would move to 33% renewables in our electricity portfolio by 2020. And we met that goal. And so we really are upping the next goals in 2030 and trying to be carbon neutral farther out. It's the goal that you are projected to meet 15 years earlier. And that's our challenge. And I'm here just to thank you because you're doing your part. You're ahead of the rest of the state. You're really shifting to renewables. You're moving to your goal way ahead. And we really have to take this example and in all these processes and with all these goals, spread it to the rest of the state and do more, because we just can't go on, even though it may be a new normal with drought and a new normal with fire. We have to work our way back from that. So I just came to congratulate you on the work you've done, let you know that we have a lot more to do, and that I want to work with you at the state level for whatever you need to implement these and make sure that the Central Coast is still in the lead as we move ahead. So thanks for your good work, and I'm glad to be here and look forward to working together.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Senator Laird. Pleasure to work with you and look forward to continuing to work with you. Well, this is where we'll get back into the meat of the meeting here and our opportunity to engage staff. I want to turn it back over to JR, and JR is going to tee up several items for us. So, JR?
Great. Thank you so much, Chair McShane, as well as Chair Palacios and Chair Groot for those wonderful remarks, as well as Board Director McPherson for all of his leadership, and then equally to Senator Laird for joining us virtually today. We can't thank you enough. After these wonderful welcomes, we do want to pivot to this great panel presentation that we have with three great minds that are, two of them are here in person and one of them's remote. But we want to give you a kind of an idea and overview about kind of our growth, our opportunities, and our challenges as CCAs. So I will provide the introductions to the three speakers, and they will go through their presentations one by one. So Nick Pappas is up first. He's the founder of NP Energy, who helps the electric industry clients succeed in rapidly changing industry. But he also previously served as Cal CCA's Director of Strategic Initiatives and Outreach. And then previous to that, he actually was at SCE as a senior legislative advocate. And then before that, an assembly fellow with Assemblymember Nathan Fletcher. Next up, then we'll have Beth Vaughn, who is none other than Cal CCA, our trade organization that represents all the CCAs in the state. She is the first executive director, and she's been there since 2017, since it's launched. And she oversees the association's advocacy, policy, and communications efforts. So it's a very small job, Beth, so, you know. But also helping to coordinate a diverse and growing membership of CCAs across the state. So she's worked extensively in both the public and private sectors, and she just has a wealth of wisdom in terms of how to kind of shepherd the CCAs forward. And then finally, last but certainly not least, he's joining us remotely is Doug Snyder. He's the Associate Director of Municipal and Cooperative Utilities for S&P Global Rating, and he's been with them since 2014. And he has a rich background in retail and wholesale electric, water, and wastewater utilities, and he currently serves as the lead analyst for S&P's CCA analytics process. So at this point, I'd like to welcome Mr. Nick Pappas up to the podium.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Nick Pappas. I'm an independent energy consultant, and over the last few years, I've had the real pleasure of working closely with the 3CE team, with Tom and his team, in my prior role actually with Cal CCA, the State Trade Association. So I'm really excited to be talking with you all today about some of the more technical elements of our decarbonization transition, thinking a little bit about the last 15 years of decarbonization and then what's on the road ahead for the next 25 years. Now, some of the topics I'm going to talk about today are a bit technical. I'm going to try to keep us out of the weeds, but if I see eyes glazing over, I'll jump ahead. I'm going to try and gloss over some of this stuff, and folks can dive deeper into the deck in your packet at your own leisure. So, jumping in, I really like to start discussions with a little bit of grounding, a little bit of orientation. So I hope folks can see the screens here. What we're looking at is the trajectory of California's renewable portfolio and clean energy standards, and it's really humbling to be presenting this in a room and in a Zoom meeting that has actually some current and former legislators who've been really influential in some of these bills. But what I want to show here is that we have made a tremendous amount of progress since 2003, when we didn't have a renewable portfolio standard, to today, where we're at about a 35% minimum standard across the state. We don't have the latest data, but as of 2019, the state was averaging around 32, 33%, and the 33% minimum came into effect last year in 2020. But we still have a pretty long way to go through 2045. We're not even quite at 40% yet. And while many many community choice aggregators and utilities are ahead of the curve, there's still a long way to go as a whole system to get to 100. Now, I like to look at charts and lines, but we're all humans, and sometimes stories make things a little bit easier to digest. So the way that I think about our decarbonization story is in a couple different phases. So I like to think of this in 3 acts. The first act, let's call it the last 17 years, was all about building renewables. Could we build as much solar and as much wind as we could, get as much solar and wind onto the grid? And there was a tremendous effort. Many of the folks in the room were involved in some of the aspects of getting the Bureau of Land Management, the permitting process, all of the transmission interconnection, these huge technical challenges. No one had built solar and wind on the scale that we did in the last 17 years. And I think that deserves a huge kudos. However, we're now pivoting into this new era, which I like to call flying the plane, which is, can we make the grid work with this heavily decarbonized, high renewable situation that we're in? And this is going to bring us new technical issues, new economic issues, new policy issues that the folks at the Public Utilities Commission and the folks at 3CE and CalCCA are spending a lot of time talking about and thinking about, how do we set the structure up to succeed in this new high renewables era. Now, I picked kind of an arbitrary date for 2030, but that's sort of when I think of us pivoting to, hopefully we've solved a lot of those flying the plane challenges. But after 2030, we really have to tackle some of these hard to reach sectors. How do we squeeze gas out of the transportation system, natural gas out of buildings, natural gas out of industry? How do we get all of that carbon out to really meet the climate challenge that, as the prior speakers have already discussed, is a critical piece for us to succeed in our policy goals? Now, running on the bottom of this chart are a few things that I see strictly increasing through our journey. The technical complexity is increasing year after year. We see that with the outages we had last year, a lot of the challenges that folks are discussing in the operations board for 3CE, I'm sure, of how do we get some of these new integration challenges solved. The value of electrification and the criticality of electrification is growing as the grid gets cleaner, and also as the transportation sector really needs to move. The need for innovation, new strategies, new technologies, things like long duration storage or offshore wind, the urgency of that is increasing. And then the unknown unknowns, what we don't know, the things that we can't even envision for 2030 or 2045, these are gonna grow out into the future as we do this thing that really no one in the world has done before. So I think that's exciting, but it also means we all have to work really hard to make it work. So over the next couple of slides, next couple of sections, I'm going to talk about 3 vignettes of issues that many of you have discussed here at 3CE and are certainly topics for our state policymakers around energy. I'm going to talk about summer reliability in a high renewables era, rooftop solar vis-a-vis transmission and utility scale solar, and then the value of electrification as we move forward. So first off, let me touch on summer reliability. So I don't think the outages from last August need any introduction. It was a real moment in California where for the first time in 20 years we had blackouts, and I think that got a lot of people from local electeds up to the governor, it got their attention, and rightfully so. And I think that has really ushered in a new moment for all of us to be thinking differently and thinking aggressively about how we make this system work as we retire a lot of our older conventional generation, like Diablo Canyon, for example. A large portion of our gas fleet is going offline, and start to replace that with solar, wind, storage, and other new technologies. So I hope folks can see the graphics here. Apologies for getting a little bit technical here. But what we're looking at is our forecast for August in the year 2022 on the far left side, August in 2026 in the middle, and August 2030 on the right. And what I believe is blue for everybody on the screen here is what we can meet with what we project will be the solar and wind on the grid. That's the top in blue. And everything underneath that line in a kind of reddish orange is essentially the net load. So what we have to meet after we've got all of our solar, all of our wind taken care of. And This graphic to me really drives home that yes, we've made a ton of progress, but that's a big chunk of orange that we're still going to have to tackle over the next 10 years here and moving into 2030. So looking a little bit closer at 2030, we can see the belly of the duck here. We've got a tremendous amount of solar and wind. We've got about 23,000 megawatts of solar and wind around 11 a.m., noon. But then as we get into the evening hours around 8 p.m., solar and wind dwindles to about 5 gigawatts, 5,000 megawatts, and we still have 43,000 megawatts we need to meet with something else. Now, let's say maybe 5,000 megawatts, if we're lucky, could be geothermal, a few thousand megawatts from biomass, a little bit of hydro. But it's very likely that natural gas is going to continue to play a huge role in that evening peak. And I think as we've been thinking about investing in storage and other peaking clean resources, this is the sort of target for us to focus on and beat over the next 25 years. I'm going to pivot here, ditch the CAISO lens, and look really more in your neighborhoods. We're all thinking about PSPS events, blackouts, the role of rooftop solar. I think there's a lot of rhetoric in this space. I've certainly contributed to it over the years and with different hats on. But I wanted to take this a little bit differently and just think about from a CCA perspective, from a how do we invest our dollars perspective, how can we think about getting the most bang for our buck, and what are some of the trade-offs and different strategies? In 25 years, is everybody going to cut the cord and be PG&E free, 3CE free, and just have a solar panel on their roof and a battery in their garage? Or are we going to take advantage of some of the utility scale resources we have in California? I had a little bit of fun with this. I asked 5 friends to give me their PG&E data for last August, and I went through the exercise of determining how much solar and storage me and my 5 friends would need to go completely off grid. And then what I'm going to do over the next few slides is talk about the comparison of how much solar and storage would we need if it was just us, each of us living as an island. What if we shared our resources? And then what if we shared our resources and we could get great solar from the desert? What are the different options? How much would it cost? How much solar and storage would we need? So on the first slide, you can see the sort of the full grid defection. We've cut the cord, we're done. This is what each of our August loads look like. This is probably a little bit small for the folks in the room, but yellow is the solar production, the blue line is what the storage is doing, and then green is the total load. So this would take about 24 kilowatts of solar and cost about $150,000 for me and my 6 friends. This is using cost estimates from some prominent vendors of solar and storage. I won't name names in this public forum, but you can find it on their websites to estimate the total cost of these systems. Now, one of the real dynamics here, I'll acknowledge my energy load is on this page, and someone who will go unnamed in my family likes to do all the laundry on one day, and maybe sometimes not in the right time of use periods. Sometimes it's me even. And that really drives up how much solar and storage you need. So without adapting our behavior, that makes it much harder for us to meet that need for one specific day or in the evening hours. And that trend occurs for each of these customers in their actual real energy data. So in the second example, we take our 6 friends and we say, what if we all share a microgrid? So we're serving ourselves with solar in our community, storage in our community, but we're sharing our loads, we're aggregating our loads so that that Sunday laundry day doesn't mean that I have to have a huge storage system. It just means the whole community collectively can handle it. So in this system, we've got about a 17 kilowatt solar need. It's about a 30% reduction relative to the standalone version. And then storage is reduced by about 50% on the capacity front and then 33% in terms of the number of kilowatt hours of storage. And you reduce the cost of that system by about half in total relative to doing it all standalone. So about $50,000. I think I have a typo here. It's 144 versus 51,000. It's actually more like a 2/3 reduction. Finally, we look at what if we could get a great solar field down in Mojave or Kern County or even in the Carrizo Plain, and we get that incredible solar resource. We put it on a tilting system so it tracks the sun all day, and we've got solar, wow, almost the entire time the sun is up, this incredible profile. And under this example, we've reduced the amount of solar we need by about 50%, and we've reduced the amount of storage we need by 40% for the number of kilowatt hours. And so the total cost of this system is only about $26,000 relative, again, to about $144,000 if we were all just living as an island. Why is that? I think this is going to be a little hard to see on the TV, but here is the solar profiles that we see for each of those systems. So I'm fortunate to live on the sunny side of San Francisco in Potrero Hill, and my solar panel modeled would be that green line in the middle. Monterey, on a nice sunny day, is just a little bit below that. But then up above with the dashed line, you can see a dramatically higher quantity of solar being produced by a utility scale system. I modeled Blythe, California, out in the desert. So you get way more megawatt hours produced per panel. And also, the cost of that panel is quite a lot lower than the cost of installing it on a rooftop. So bringing it all back together, there's really some policy choices here. If you want everybody to have a resilient home in the event of an outage, maybe you need some homes, perhaps for medical baseline customers, to have their own solar and storage. But if what you're looking for is community resilience, you can save a lot of money by aggregating those loads and trying not to have everybody's load be met solely with themselves as an island. But if we really want to have a conversation about decarbonizing the entire economy, electrifying everything, we're really going to need to squeeze as much energy out of our resources as we can. And that's really where we need to be talking about getting access to these higher value renewable resources, whether that's solar in the desert, wind offshore here in Monterey County or off of Diablo Canyon or up in Humboldt. We need to start thinking about how do we maximize the amount of energy we're getting from the dollars we put into the grid. Finally, I'm going to just breeze through, because I'm probably over time, a couple comments on electrification and the role that you all can play as 3CE. So some of the prior speakers made some great comments about the importance of transportation electrification, industrial electrification, building electrification. I'm going to add a couple of graphics just to think about how those issues interact within the climate space. This is a graphic courtesy of the Public Utilities Commission looking at emissions trends over the last 20 years. And you can see the red line here is electricity. We still have a ways to go, but we're doing a lot. We have a steady decrease over the last 10 or 12 years, and the next 10 years are probably going to see that decrease even further. But you see a lot of stagnation in other sectors. And even this transportation line, there's a dip, but actually with the economic rebound in the last few years, we've seen transportation emissions bounce back. And we're seeing with, let's just say, rideshare, vehicle miles travel increases, there's a lot of bounce back in transportation emissions across the state. So if we're serious about meeting the entirety of this emissions pie, our sort of emissions reductions per dollar are very quickly going to be more valuable in transportation, buildings, than they will in electricity. That's not to say we don't have to keep decarbonizing electricity, but we need to start bending the curve for transportation emissions, building emissions, industrial emissions. So I'll leave it there. I want to thank you all for having me. This was a very fun whirlwind first talk back in person after a long time, but I really appreciate the invite, and I'll pass it back to JR. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Now you all get to be wowed by Beth Vaughn.
No, thank you. No, good job, Nick. Trained very well. Excellent. My name is Beth Vaughn. I'm the Executive Director of the California Community Choice Association. Thank you so much for having me. And also, I'm staying through into the evening, so I'm happy to chat with folks afterwards. Hey, Doss, down there. But I'm going to go really fast because I know you're short on time, and I can talk really quickly. So I was asked today to cover growth, challenges, and opportunities, because there's an awful lot to talk about with the CCA community. Just for those of you that don't know about us, the California Community Choice Association, we're actually in our 5th year of existence. I think, Tom, you were one of the original members way back in 2016 when the Articles of Incorporation were filed. As someone mentioned, JR, that I came on in July of 2017 as the first executive director. And we have grown. Back then there were 8 CCAs, 8 board members. Now I have 15 directors on the Cal CCA board. And as of October 1st, we will have 23 operational CCAs in the state of California. And they're all shapes and sizes, as you folks know. We have now 12 full-time staff at Cal CCA with 2 more that we'll be hiring. And what's a little bit different about the California Community Choice Association is that we run these staff committees, about 10 of them, standing staff committees, where I can tell you in a single day we have more than 300 of the CCA staff touch our SharePoint with our document management system. So we run pretty big. Our regulatory committee has over 100 people on the email distribution list. Over 50 come every single week to the standing meeting. Similar to Ledge Committee, Marketing Committee, Procurement Committee, and we have all sorts of rules, antitrust rules in terms of what can be discussed. But it is a lot to shepherd and herd. And as Tom, I think, pointed out, really what we're about is cultivating the legislative and regulatory environment to support the long-term sustainability of locally run CCA electricity providers. All right, growth. There's the map that we talk about. On the left-hand side, you see the locations. In green are the CCAs that are serving customers. In orange, where implementation plans have been filed. And then blue is considering CCA. So, of course, on October 1st, we will be flipping the switch on the county of Santa Barbara. So the color will change to green. Also, there has been a lot of growth that's been going on. If you look at the timeline on the right-hand side, 2021, we had San Diego Community Power and Clean Energy Alliance both launch in the San Diego Gas and Electric territory. So that is big news. It's a big deal. Also a big deal because San Diego Gas and Electric has signaled that they want out of the generation business. So this is a huge opportunity for us to be working with these folks. The other thing I'll mention is on that map, you see the county of San Diego is still blue. Well, last week the county voted to join San Diego Community Power. So again, another big move is afoot. And of course, on October 1st, while you will be expanding to new communities, the city of Santa Barbara will be standing up the Santa Barbara Clean Energy CCA. So they also will be joining us or they have joined us as an operational member. One thing I want to point out on the timeline, if you have a look there in 2020, you'll see Western Community Energy. So I think, as you all know, we've taken them off the map on the left-hand side because they are no longer serving customers. On May 24th, they filed for bankruptcy, and I know that your board has discussed it. Again, I want to say that out of crisis comes opportunity. When that happened, as Tom knows, I think the CalCCA board met every single day immediately afterwards and discussed what should we do about this. I have to say that our credibility as CCAs across California took a hit. I was called to account, I guess, or discuss this with the governor's office, with other regulatory agencies. And what I'll say about our board is immediately that week, they directed me to form the CalCCA Practices and Standards Committee. And so what we have there is a core group of chief financial officers from the CCAs that got together to do some forensics analysis of what happened. And remember, it was a really difficult time for a CCA to launch. And also remember that WCE has 40% or had 40% of their customers were low-income care customers. So there are a number of things that happened in 2020 that made it very difficult. But what we did with this Practice and Standards Committee is come up with a framework. And they worked very hard for a couple of months there. And in August, we brought to the CalCCA board a framework that has enhanced planning, specifically around implementation planning and schedules and milestones, enhanced transparency, particularly around data and providing financial as well as other public data and policies, and also enhanced reporting in terms of identifying some key metrics that need to be reported. Now, to who is the question? I presented this actually to the governor's office on Monday, this past Monday, which, as well as the California Public Utilities Commission, and I'll tell you, it was very well received. There's a lot more detail, obviously, than those 3 bullet points, but we went into the detail around each of them, and then we talked about, it's one thing to make it a requirement of membership for CalCCA, but how do we actually bring this into the planning and best practices standards, industry standards, across the board. And so there is an open case at the Public Utilities Commission, provider of last resort, where we'll be introducing some of these ideas. Some things we can do now, some things you already do now. I have to say that we looked at 3CE as an example. For example, you have your web page that we referred to as almost a data room where you have your policies easily accessible, as well as financial statements and other sorts of financial documents. We've taken that, Peninsula Clean Energy and others, talking with the finance community, to identify what would be key and how we could provide CalCCA could be the conduit by which folks can go through and find these public documents. So we're working with a large group within the CCA community, but also the finance community, to further these ideas and figure out how we can implement them. And as I said, so it won't just apply to CCAs, but what we'd like to see is applying this to load-serving entities across the board. So anyways, enough on that. I could give you a whole presentation on that. But I wanted to bring to your attention a couple of other things in terms of policy priorities. And every month, my policy priorities are, there's always something urgent. But one of the things that we did is we pivoted in the legislature there with the budget trailer bill. Again, as I mentioned, WCE launched in a pandemic. 40% were care customers, so unpaid utility bills truly had an impact. And I know they have an impact here. So what we were able to do is, when we saw that when the state budget passed on June 15th, it included $1 billion to cover energy bill arrearages for all load-serving entities, POUs, IOUs, and CCAs, but the mechanics of it and the funding weren't settled. So we got involved with the budget staff and legislators, and we worked on some provisions that would ensure that the California Arrearages Payment Program, the CAP funds, allocated to the IOUs are distributed proportionately between the IOU and the CCA customers, and that partial payments received from the customers for arrearages are also allocated proportionately back to IOUs and CCAs. And Tom, I just have to say, it's not the last you've heard from us on this, because there's actually a glitch in some legislation set up back in 1986 regarding disconnections that we may bring to the board as a possible legislative initiative next year. So there's a lot going on in there. The other thing I want to flag is supplier diversity. That's been a really hot issue. It is last 3 years I've had to appear in front of the Public Utilities Commission at the en banc that occurs September, October. And again, I can talk more about it at dinner, but Senate Bill 255, Steve Bradford passed that. We supported it, but there's a lot of controversy, and I understand, I think some of you have been approached by some folks that had concerns about CCA performance. This is an example where, again, a challenge has been turned into an opportunity. I've been after the Public Utilities Commission now for the 4 years I've been executive director, to stop trying to take a square peg and put it into a round hole. That we really have to take a step back and talk about General Order 156 and what we're trying to achieve. As many of you know, public agencies can't do everything that is directed of the IOUs. Again, I could do a whole presentation on this, but there's something very wrong with the way it's been established in my mind. But billions of dollars in revenue are generated, and so it's a very popular program. But as you see up here, what we did is this came up August 25th in the oversight hearing of the Public Utilities Commission. Steve Bradford had a report from the Hispanics Chamber of Commerce about failure to diversify and accuse CCAs of certain things. We got in front of that. We got in front of it with the PUC. We got in front of it through California Energy Markets, through a publication. We got the story out there, and it's on that last bullet there. Our performance is against this clearinghouse that exists. Well, think of what you do. 90% of what you do is procure energy, and there's only 27 energy suppliers in a list of 8,800 businesses. So there's something wrong with that database, and we were not allowed to include other databases. Long story short, we actually had a positive commentary there out of the CPUC Supplier Diversity Report, which was published on September 2nd. Our article got out on September 3rd. And we are in a proceeding where we felt like we weren't being listened to. Now they've called a workshop next week where we're going to get our own template, you guys, in terms of how do we actually achieve the purpose of what I think supplier diversity and workforce diversity really is all about. So again, happy to talk further about that. Last thing I'll talk about, because I don't want to eat into Doug's time, is connecting the dots between policy and procurement. And I'll tell you, that's where Nick was going, I think. Trying to take a step back, think about the big picture, think about the policy debate, look at the procurement on the ground, what needs to happen. And CCAs are the ones that are out buying clean energy resources, so it's a very important job that you all have, and then how that influences, in turn, the policy that's being made as well. So one thing we do at CalCCA is we look at what the CCAs are doing in total. And I've only got 2 graphs, unlike you, Nick. This one is the cumulative new build of resources. So since I came on, we started collecting data in 2018. And as you can see, definitely the CCAs have grown, the customer base has grown, but we have been purchasing rapidly. And you can see the online dates are on the x-axis there. Don't worry about the numbers, but look at the colors. So what you see there is everything with kind of a yellow, orangish, has something to do with solar. It could be a hybrid as well. But look at how the blue, more and more blue comes into it, and more green. So what we're seeing is a diversity of resources over time. We're seeing the CCAs, and I have to say hats off to you folks, you in Silicon Valley, the first with a geothermal contract at the gate. We're getting a diversity. We take this then, these are cumulative megawatts, and every November, CalCCA does a big update. We do a big publication, including identifying the various contracts. If you haven't seen it, we'll make sure we get it to you. But what we have to do is when we talk about reliability, which is where Nick went, is it's one thing to look at megawatts, but what do they bring to the grid? So what we do is we apply whatever at the time, and this is the 2019 IRP, Integrated Resource Planning Procurement Track Requirements, we applied the calculation, the effective load carrying capacity, and you see all the yellow and orange goes away, and all that beautiful blue in different shades shows up. What you're seeing on that graph is highlighted in green is the procurement obligation cumulatively of all of the CCAs, in aggregate, I'm sorry, of all the CCAs. I was up until June showing for that month of, or for that year of 2021 that we were over procured, but look at how we didn't make the top of the green there on 2021. And what that indicates is this problem that we're encountering around supply issues, transmission issues, interconnection issues. There's a problem here that has to be solved, hence the summer reliability, emergency reliability order that's come out. I also met on Monday with Energy Division, and we talked about this. I said, okay, I hear you for 2022 and 2023, but in identifying the need for those years, have you looked at the over-procurement of our CCAs? Do you understand what our CCAs have been doing? They didn't seem to have the same data that we had, which is not unusual. But also there's a question, as they move forward, they keep changing the accounting rules. And that's what I mean about policy and procurement, right? It's kind of like this moving target. And the more certainty we have, because my point is value streams, right? What are you buying for 2030 if the accounting changes and the compliance changes? So that's a fight or a debate we're constantly having. All right. But besides all of that, what we're doing in the CCAs is constructing stuff. And I just wanted to say hats off to you. There's some photos up there that we grabbed for our quarterly report. Top left is the Ormat geothermal project that you folks have in Mono County. The second one on the right there, I believe, is in Kings County with Recurrent, your solar and storage project. You can see where CCAs are doing wind, microgrids. That's Matthew Marshall, our president of CalCCA at the moment, and the executive director of Redwood Coast Energy Authority. So new construction boom. You asked me back to do a presentation on programs and local innovation, but this is just a smattering. The programs that really are making a difference, we hold public webinars on the last Friday of every month, and that's where there's a lot of best practice sharing. We take a CCA, we take their partner, and then we host these public webinars. And we have regulators, legislators, and legislative staff come on to learn more and more about what the CCAs are doing. All right, last thing is the annual meeting, CalCCA annual meeting. We were planning to have this in person in November at the San Jose Convention Center, but in canceling last year, they forced us to the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday directly after Thanksgiving. So apologies to everybody, but we're going to go virtual. I just can't think of a worse time to be in person, and we were expecting over 600 people. We're trying to negotiate with them a time in the spring of 2022. We started in 2019 having an elected officials luncheon, and we have state legislators show up along with all of you are all invited, so I wanted to give you a heads up on that. And speaking of annual meetings, does anybody remember the 2018 CalCCA Monterey Bay and Community Power? Did any of you attend that? Yes? why did we not patent that shot and sell little otters? Our budgets would be, this is like the cutest picture. It's the most popular picture. I get requests for it. So in the midst of the pandemic last year, our otters and the power of partnerships, which I still think is an awesome theme, they appeared at our meeting last year in 2020. And Tom, I honestly, Tom and I go way back. What a lot of people don't know is that Tom actually hired me in July of 2017. So Tom, I've always thought that we had the corner on cuteness. I honestly did. I thought nobody could beat us. But I have to say, sadly, that Matthew Marshall, look what he did. Small children. This is our most popular edition. So if you don't get a copy of this, we have a digital and hard copies of the CalCCA quarterly report. It comes out each season. This one came out, and we have more clicks on this because it's got Matthew's young daughter. So do you have any grandkids, or do you have any animals? Anyways, there's the copy for you. I have extra copies that I'll leave on the table back here, but please have a look. What's in there is we go out, our marketing committee has every single CCA, both operational and affiliates, participate once a month, and they put this awesome publication together, and it gives you some insight into who's doing what where. So again, a sharing of best practices. Anyways, thank you all so much for having me, and I'm gonna hand back to JR and to Doug. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Beth. Tom, we had to get you after you not being in the program of the 2018 CalCCA meeting. So in any event, we will now pivot to the virtual realm and have Mr. Doug Snyder from S&P Global Rating walk us through the financial perspective of CCA. So welcome, Doug, from Colorado.
Great, thanks, Chair. Can everybody hear me all right? Okay, great. So should I be sharing my screen, or do you have a copy you can share?
I could actually advance the slides for you if that helps.
Okay, yep, that'd be great. I'll give you a shout out when to advance. So first of all, thanks so much to 3CE for having me. Thanks to the great panels, Nick and Beth. Just to manage expectations a little bit, my presentation might sound a little bit more doom and gloom. And if my math is right, I have about 100% less cute pictures of animals and kiddos. So with keeping that in mind, I think the important thing is it's possible for some CCAs to mitigate and manage through some of the challenges I'm going to be addressing, and ultimately arrive at an investment grade credit rating like 3CE actually has done. So, Tom and Rob actually spoke at S&P's annual Public Power Conference last year. I spoke at a panel hosted by Beth and CalCCA. Now Beth and I are speaking on a panel together hosted by 3CE. So I'm excited to stay tuned for whatever the next iteration looks like. I know we don't have too horribly much time, so I'll keep the introductions brief, but given the mutually new faces, I do want to give a brief introduction. Next slide, please. So again, I'm Doug Snyder. I've been with S&P for 7 years now, most of that time spent on some iteration of our public power team. I actually mostly grew up in the Bay Area, but moved to Colorado and been here well over a decade now. You can see on the slide a various list of utilities. These are either local, i.e. California, or larger utilities that I'm either currently lead analyst on or have been so in the past, just to kind of provide a frame of reference for my background. I think the big takeaway, if nothing else, is that public power utilities really like their acronyms. Depending on each of your various roles at your cities, you may have interacted with S&P in some capacity, but I know that's probably not the case for everyone. So setting the stage a little bit for credit ratings, simply what I do and what my colleagues do is analyze utilities from top to bottom and ultimately provide an opinion on that utility's creditworthiness. Synthesizing it into a single sentence, that's what a credit rating really boils down to. We get the question a lot, why would somebody want a credit rating? And that question's ultimately going to be an individual decision for a given entity. We understand even when there's not a debt issuance that sometimes ratings can help establish credit collateral thresholds or posting requirements in some cases. Next slide, please. So again, briefly, I wanted to touch on S&P's approach for actually rating CCAs. We do maintain a wholesale joint action agency criteria. However, we actually rate CCAs under our retail electric criteria. There's a lot of moving parts within the framework. I'm happy to provide a copy if anyone's interested, but the takeaway is that CCA business model really fits nicely within that framework. Under that framework, we do have kind of two halves of credit. We have the enterprise and financial risk. I know JR said I was going to be talking about, the financial perspective, but I think what's important to keep in mind is CCAs are so operationally complex that while we do look at financial metrics, a lot of the challenges we do see are more so on the operational side, which we'll get to in a little bit. Next slide, please. So starting off, I wanted to cover the key risks we see for CCAs kind of under that lens of our framework and criteria. A lot of these bullet points probably aren't anything new or too surprising. It is nice having an audience who actually knows what a PCIA is. But looking at the first risk, we do look at opt-out. So when looking at opt-out, there's a couple layers that we're looking at. We're looking at retail customer opt-out, things like historical track record. What happens if rates go above the IOU? And what if they stay there? Is there a track record of that happening? And if so, what does customer retention look like? For CCAs that have maintained rates below the IOU kind of in perpetuity, is that a hard and fast rule, or is the board and management willing to kind of push that if they need to pull a financial lever? We also look at future growth or shifts that could influence those rates. We see that 3CE is growing. Something we're looking at in our rating is that new service territory in line with the vision? Is it a green community, or is it maybe a little bit less progressive, where you might have some of the citizens who really don't get the green push, or just aren't on board, or maybe even are a little bit more distrustful of kind of, I'll call it quasi-governmental agencies. We also look at if mass exodus is a risk. Obviously we saw a lot of disinformation campaigns coming out of the IOU that shall not be named back when MCE was getting their start, and certainly there's been some legislation and they had their hands slapped, but nonetheless we keep an eye on what the campaigning against the CCAs looks like. And something for opt-out that probably isn't really discussed as often is the possibility of member exit. We all like to think that that's a non-starter, but ultimately our job is to jump into the JPA agreements, to wade through the legalese and to see, okay, if a member city did want to exit, is the CCA liable, or is the member city liable rather? Are there any clawback provisions that would essentially make a departing city have to make the CCA whole? Looking at rates, alongside opt-out risk, we do look at rate flexibility. The majority of credits S&P rates in public power do have a monopolistic position, which puts CCAs at a distinctly higher risk category on a relative basis. We generally see rate making flexibility as a pretty big financial lever that utilities can pull to adjust their budgets, but this flexibility can obviously kind of be hamstrung for CCAs. We also obviously consider how sensitive customers are to rates. We'll look at service territory characteristics, how well positioned are your customers to actually absorb rate increases for their monthly incomes. Obviously, we are keeping a close eye on the PCIA. It's continually evolving. It sounds like this next coming year is going to be a little bit less burdensome than it has been in the past due to some changes in the generated PG&E and things like that. But nonetheless, we're keeping a close eye on how the CPUC is kind of siding and how that's evolving. And then finally, I would say one of kind of the keystone aspects to our analysis is power supply planning. And this is a big one for all power utilities, but I think especially true for CCAs, just given the fundamental model. Specifically, as my fellow panelists have kind of alluded to, can CCAs essentially balance the duck curve? You know, can you balance the need for firm power with the need and or desire for renewables? And what does that firming strategy entail given current technology? You know, we consider the longer term nature of PPAs versus a potentially more volatile customer base. Again, if there is mass opt out, are you going to be left long? Are you going to be able to remarket that power? Do you have a market exposure? Next slide, please. Kind of continuing on for power supply planning, obviously one way to acquire firm power is through contracts, whether that's PPAs with performance penalties or delivery minimums. You know, these are obviously beneficial, but they're only as good as the counterparty providing the guarantee. So if a CCA, you know, gets power from 20 different counterparties, sure, that might be great, but if S&P doesn't have a rating on any of those counterparties, we're potentially going to have some concern with ability to perform on those. And I think ultimately the key takeaway to remember is the more exposure there is to counterparty failure, the more we believe there is the potential for a market exposure event. For wildfire risk, it sounds blasphemous to say that we don't see wildfires as a risk in the state, especially, you know, in 2021, looking at Dixie and Cawdor and Monument still burning. From a credit perspective, though, it's not as significant of a concern for CCAs relative to other utilities who have more direct ownership of assets. And this all really boils down to the inverse condemnation doctrine and strict liability standard, which can ultimately lead to utility being held liable for potentially catastrophic damages that their assets cause, regardless of fault. You know, obviously, if there's a fire that causes economic dislocation or significant damage, that can lead to credit challenges. We do look at CPUC's Tier 2 and Tier 3 fire risk maps, albeit, you know, they are a little bit outdated, but it's still a good tool to kind of gauge proximity to wildfires. But I think the big risk we see is, as we're hearing CCAs talk more and more about asset ownership, whether that's directly or indirectly, we could see some of that exposure to inverse condemnation kind of balloon. You know, if you look at Trinity PUD up north, they were found liable for a wildfire a few years ago, and that resulted in over 3 notches of rating impact to them because they just didn't have the liquidity to cover. Thankfully for them, insurance covered it, but now they're unable to acquire reinsurance. So, you know, these are things and exposures that we're going to keep a close eye on as CCAs can consider acquiring assets. Finally, strategic alignment, kind of another keystone on the enterprise profile. So we are definitely looking for a track record of strategic alignment among the board and management. Just a small anecdote, if a CCA wants to pull a financial lever, say they want to raise rates and the board says, no, let's use cash instead, we're going to take note of that. And that financial flexibility is really going to be hamstrung in our view. So, you know, again, a small anecdote, but it can really be extrapolated to kind of any strategic or financial decision making that CCAs and boards are responsible for. We also consider the stream of decisions. You know, where does the buck stop? Can management make certain decisions without board approval? How timely can they make these decisions? And ultimately, kind of the word of the day is flexibility, and it's really more of a relative analysis. There's not some kind of quantitative score we put on these factors. Next slide, please. So just flipping over, and I'll try to keep this brief, liquidity is key. Given all of these risks I talked about, the more instances there are of a risk that a CCA can't mitigate, the more we think liquidity becomes important, whether that's using cash in lieu of a rate increase, bridging a period of market exposure, or, you know, you name the scenario. You know, the other financial metrics we look at traditionally are less immediately relevant due to that general lack of leverage and asset ownership. But again, as CCAs start to explore that asset ownership world, these could become much more important in our analysis. So with those risks out of the way, next slide, please, I'll cover some topics that I think are probably of interest to folks. So a lot of these challenges were probably ringing bells and making folks think about problems that did occur at Western. So, while we still don't have perfect information at S&P, we do understand, as Beth alluded to, that delinquencies were a large challenge. That coupled with low liquidity and uncommitted credit lines that didn't perform, that kind of in turn led to Western unable to perform on its own PPAs, and in turn had to face the markets, which unfortunately turned against them in that timing. So, it was a really bad situation with really bad timing, but ultimately the outcome was dissolution. So a lot of folks have been asking, and fairly so, what does that mean for S&P's opinion of other CCAs? And I think that our key takeaway is that it's not one size fits all. We think among our few public rated CCAs that there's a level of self-selection as they came to us to pursue a credit rating, but nonetheless among those public rated CCAs, including 3CE, everybody has their own strengths and challenges, but pretty universally, the investment grade CCAs have a more established track record of just operating in good financial metrics, robust service territories, and ultimately, in the worst case, we think they would be able to withstand a similar market exposure event that Western saw and ultimately collapsed under. So, yes, the issues at Western highlight some of the potential pitfalls that a CCA can face, but does S&P see it as a death knell for the CCA business model? Absolutely not. Nonetheless, as we continue to monitor our ratings, these will be some of the key aspects we're continually looking at and discussing with management teams. Next slide, please. One other final topic that I know there is some interest in is with the recent JPA formations, kind of mega JPAs, a JPA of JPAs. I'll touch on those implications from a credit rating agency perspective. First, the actual formation of a JPA by itself is really credit neutral. Those implications are going to vary based on a number of factors. This is another instance when we're going to be wading into the contracts, we're going to be doing a deep dive into the legalese. But some of the takeaways, I think, on the opportunity side, obviously you have enhanced economies of scale. You have potentially favorable contract terms and pricing. You have continued growth. You have really good visibility and clear cooperation among CCAs, which I think is kind of a unique aspect, and even in public power. And then, of course, better market access. On the flip side, for risks, as I alluded to earlier, direct ownership and assets carries with it its own risks, especially in California. Depending on the step-up provisions, you might have stronger CCAs that are exposed to weaker member CCAs who could be more likely to default on their obligations, where the stronger CCAs have to step up and potentially cover power that they weren't really expecting to take. Also, just adding leverage is a shift in MO, and again, we'd need to see what board alignment looks like in terms of maintenance of financial metrics and really staying on top of that leverage. And finally, it raises the potential for strategic misalignment, not internally, but between one CCA to the other. There might be a threshold for voting where 2/3 of the members say, yeah, this project's great, and the remaining 1/3 it's really just not optimal for them. So these are all anecdotes until we actually start diving into these JPAs and see the pen on the ink on the paper. We can't really speak explicitly whether it's a good thing, a bad thing, or a neutral thing. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to cover this whole slide. I think I'm right at time, but I did just want to kind of give everybody an idea of what is S&P thinking about, not just for CCAs, but what are we thinking about for public power in 2021. These are kind of the hot button items that might not have been covered before. They certainly are a potential challenge for CCAs. I'll let you read through these, but just in closing, I kind of wanted to reiterate that after 20 minutes of doom and gloom, and challenges. I don't have nearly the time to cover how a CCA can mitigate these things, but the A stable rating that S&P maintains on 3CE, I think should probably speak for itself in terms of how a CCA can really, again, manage through these challenges. And again, if anybody's interested, we do have a copy of that rating report. We do have a copy of our criteria. We have our 2021 Power Outlook article. I'm happy to distribute all of those if anybody's interested. So with that, I'll sign off and throw it back to JR. And thanks everybody for your time.
Thank you so much, Doug. That was very insightful. If it pleases the chair, we certainly could entertain about 5 minutes of questions for the speakers, if that works, and then move to a quick break.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea. There may be some, raise your hand if you're on Zoom. Otherwise, well, let's start here in the chambers. If there's an ops board or a policy board member that has any questions for Beth, Nick, or for Doug. Okay, there's Doss. We'll start with Doss. Go ahead.
In terms of managing future risk, does scale help? Meaning, does additional customer base help? Are there any types of customer that, meaning ag, commercial, or residential, that are particularly vital, that we need to continue to be on the PR offensive to limit risk?
Sure. So I think I'll answer that in two parts. Before February and Uri and ERCOT and all of that, I probably would have wholeheartedly said, yes, scale is always a good thing. But we saw in Texas, the bigger they are, the harder they fall with Brazos going to default on their obligations. And I think, that really highlighted the fact that you need strategic alignment for scale to be a good thing. If you have every member community in alignment and the boards are aligned and everybody's moving in the same direction, scale is absolutely a good thing. But again, the more folks you have, the more potential you do have for that misalignment. For the customer composition, residential customers provide a significant degree of stability. I think throughout the pandemic in public power, we've only had 2 rating actions in all of public power, and those were for Anaheim and Reedy Creek, which, if you're familiar, that's Disneyland and Disney World. The highly residential nature of most of the issuers we rate have really provided a high degree of stability, through a global pandemic. So the more residential we see, probably the better. On the flip side, if we see a lot of commercial or industrial or agricultural concentration, you have a higher percentage of your load with fewer meters, which ultimately to us means more potential for disruption.
Thank you. Just in this room here, and then we'll go to Zoom real quick. Just looking for policy board members or operations board members. Not seeing any hands raised. So maybe one question I would ask for Beth. You speak very eloquently to the state and Cal CCA and CCAs and what we face. What about the feds? We have a new president in office, and I think many of us have been very optimistic as to investments and grants, support. What's the outlook there?
Yeah, so as we're working on our staff plan now and the retreat with the board this fall, these are the collection of ideas that we're gathering. Certainly when I saw that happen, right, with the change with the administration, we became an associate member of the American Public Power Association. So APA was the first place I reached out to kind of go to folks that are already established in Washington, D.C., being that we're new and we've got an awful lot going on in California. How can we coordinate with them and form a coalition? The other thing is I meet bi-weekly with the Renewable Trades Associations, all of whom have a presence, the big national folks in Washington, D.C. So there's been a lot of discussion around there. Right now, it's really making sure that the opportunities and the information is gathered and distributed and made available. I think you made a point that 12 million someone did in grants already here, just 3CE has been able to receive. So our legislative committee, even just, was it last week, folks were bringing together information because some of them have, say, with their county, a legislative advocate in Washington, D.C. So what we're trying to do at the moment is leverage all of our CCAs. We'll have all this information, bring it to one place. Honestly, if my board's up for it, we'll be looking at that, in our budget, if it's a possibility. But certainly, they've kept me pretty busy here in California, and we've just kind of been phasing our growth. But with this change in administration, I think there's tons of opportunities.
Seems like it. Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah. I think at this point we do have a bio break scheduled. I think originally we were thinking 10 minutes. We could go to 5. I do see Norm real quick. Norm, did you want to ask a question? Okay. Yeah, we'll go to that, and then we can take the 5-minute break if that's okay. Okay, great. Norm, our CAC chair.
Sure, and my question's for Mr. Snyder. Just wondering about how you rate for cyber security, and what is there a baseline criteria that you're using? And the reason I'm asking is because a lot of the cybersecurity breaches that we see are from unknown sources that are unanticipated, and I'm just wondering how you rate for cybersecurity. Thank you.
Sure. I really appreciate the question. It would be remiss if I forgot that. I think it was on the last slide of Hot Topics. It's certainly something that, since I've been going to APPA conferences, it's been a huge topic. It's something that's really hard to quantify in terms of a rating. So in terms of how we're looking at it, I can't give you stats and figures, i.e. we're not assigning a score on a scale of 1 to 5. Really, what we're doing is we're taking a comparative basis and we're saying, okay, here's the cybersecurity program that's been instituted at the gold standard. They have cybersecurity insurance. Everybody has the ethical hackers now, but they have an entire team dedicated. They have an executive officer dedicated to cybersecurity. We look for the utilities that can really talk about the attacks that they've experienced and what that actually means for their system. So the short answer to your question is we don't have any specific metrics we look at, but if a management team is falling behind on their risk management and cyber mitigation, you would likely see that appear in a rating differential from the same utility in a vacuum without the given strong cyber risk mitigation practices.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Doug. Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break. We'll see if Heather or Shelley can tee up a timer, and we'll reconvene in promptly 5 minutes for Tom's presentation and Q&A. Thanks. On time here. Tom's going to get all the tough questions. For members of the public that are attending, we will have public comment at the end of the meeting. So just want to make sure we have everybody aware of that. We don't quite have everybody back, but we're close. So just another minute, please.
There's one behind the air purifier for you, Kyle. Okay.
There. We're getting closer. Just waiting on 2 more. Okay, thank you for your patience. Okay, let's go ahead and tune things back in. The break's over. Thanks everybody on Zoom for your patience. Got everybody back here. So, JR, you going to tee this up, or should we turn it right over to Tom?
Sure, no, I can tee it up. So thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Chair McShane.
And
So-
JR, before we start, I just wanted to reconfirm that we still have a quorum.
Okay, well, thank you. We appreciate that. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, with the quorum confirmed. So the second half of this first annual meeting will comprise of Mr. Habashi giving us his illustrious wisdom on the future of the CCA and his vision for deploying renewable resources. Then we'll have staff walk us through the strategic focus, as well as some final comments from Tom before we turn it over to Vice Chair Doss Williams for some closing remarks, and then move to about 5 to 10 minutes, depending upon time for public comment. So I will turn it over to Mr. Tom Habashi, the CEO of Central Coast Community Energy.
Thank you, JR. Mr. Chairman, members of the Policy Board and Operations Board. I believe that everyone here today, whether in person or on Zoom, believes that the planet is warming up. Record-breaking fires in the West are more destructive than ever, and storms in the East are violent and deadly. And that's only part of the story. Global warming is slowly altering life as we know it on land and at sea. Now, it is true that the planet goes through cycles of cooling and warming every 10,000 years. That's what scientists tells us. And that life has managed to adapt to these cycles for millions of years. It is also true that human activities in the past 150 years have exponentially accelerated the warming of Earth well beyond our ability to adapt and adjust quickly. I also suspect that most of you here agree that the burning of fossil fuels is the primary culprit of global warming. It stands to reason then that we should do everything we can do effectively to stop the burning of fossil fuels in order to generate electricity or energy. This must be our ultimate goal. But which path must we take to achieve that end? Now, I think if I ask each one of you, I would probably end up with twice as many answers as the number of people listening to me right now. Some views are driven by long-held beliefs, while others are motivated by personal economics. So here are some of mine. Build solar where the sun always shines and the land is plentiful. Build wind where the wind blows strong and on land and at sea. Build hydroelectric where rivers flow, and geothermal where steam is close to Earth's surface. And finally, build transmission lines to bring that energy to homes and businesses and factories where people live and work today. Now, that's one part of the equation. As most of you know by now, unlike fossil fuel generation, solar and wind generation happens where it happens, when it happens. It doesn't necessarily follow demand, and demand in our business is king. It happens independently and expects that supply will follow it instantaneously. Another part of the equation, perhaps even more urgent than building more renewables, is to build standalone storage facilities everywhere, especially near locations with critical demand, such as hospital, police stations, fire station, cooling facilities, and so on. Having storage near consumption centers allow for the balancing of supply and demand while providing the resiliency that critical facilities need. The utilities shutoffs have shown we need backup generation at strategic critical facilities and a key substation to provide reliable power to the greatest number of customers during these unplanned outages or events. Now, is that the full equation? Not exactly. I left out the role of behind the meters, energy production and storage. Behind the meter energy production, also known as distributed generation, microgeneration, or solar rooftops, should be reserved for electricity demand that resides in isolated pockets. And let me explain. If a community wants to live up in the mountains in a small isolated area surrounded by forest land, if a winery plants its grapes and makes wine far away from city centers, if farmers have equipment serving hundreds of acres in the middle of nowhere, far from charging infrastructure, then microgeneration and even disconnecting from the grid is absolutely the answer. Microgeneration will give the individual customers the electricity they need and avoid costly transmission lines that utilities must build and maintain to serve only few customers at the expense of the many. Most importantly, it reduces the likelihood of devastating fires often caused by falling trees, short-circuiting distribution lines up in the forest somewhere. Now let's say that our vision is clear, our goals are set, and our path is smooth and free of all obstacles. Let's say that we are successful in reaching 100% renewable energy, perfectly balanced, so perfectly balancing supply and demand every hour of every day. Is that enough? It's a tall order, and it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of money. But it's doable. But is that enough? I wish the answer is yes, but the fact remains that electricity production in California generates 20% of the total greenhouse gas emissions in the state. A great deal must be done in the transportation, building, ag, industrial sector. What is the answer then? In 2 words, electrify everything. Cars, light vehicles, heavy vehicles, tractors, buses, water, heaters, furnaces, trains, planes, anything and everything that relies on the burning of fossil fuels should be converted to run on electricity. Obviously, this won't be done overnight, and even more obvious, this will be the responsibility of everyone: federal, state, local governments, activists, businesses, both for and not for profit alike. Everyone must play a role in bringing about this transformation. And now we get to the interesting question. How will this drama unfold? Who gets to play the leading role and on which stage? More importantly, which roles do we play? Which role do we play? When do we know which stage to go on, or if there is a role for us at all? Now here's a few of my thoughts. I believe this agency's primary goal or role is to accelerate the deployment of renewable resources everywhere and to build or encourage building of a sizable portfolio of distributed storage in our service area until we can achieve a near perfect balance of supply and demand every hour of every day. And you can help. You need to connect with your elected officials in Sacramento to enact legislation that will prevent the CPUC from continuously eroding our competitive position. And here I'm giving you a hint, SB 612, which is now a 2-year bill. We also ask that you reach out to the legislators in Congress to extend the investment tax credit to standalone storage. I also believe that this agency should take a support role in universal electrification. The individuals and businesses supported with a big push from federal, state, and local governments should be out in front here. We can provide the education, the monetary incentives, but we should let the lead actors on that stage do their job. In some cases, we may be completely in the background playing an extra. While I imagine that the day will come when airplanes and cruise ships can run on electricity, I don't see much of an immediate role for us on that stage. I submit to you that our success in reaching our goal and eventually achieving our mission involves each one of us understanding clearly where they fit on the stage and what role they play. because it is then and only then that we can work harmoniously to end our addiction to the burning of natural resources, more specifically fossil fuels. In conclusion, whether you are a lover of nature and becoming increasingly worried about what is happening to our planet, or if you are simply nostalgic to the good old days, I am here to tell you that we can make a difference right now. I believe life will always prevail and that humans can change and adapt better than any other life form on this planet. I believe we are smarter, much smarter than our ancestors, and incredibly more effective in combating threats, whether they happen naturally or if they are man-made. I look forward to the challenges of tomorrow. Meanwhile, I'm making the best of today. I'm having a lot of fun, and I'm delighted to join you on this journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tom, for those wonderful and inspiring words. Next up, I'd like to invite Dennis Deach O'Neill, then Robert Shaw, our Chief Operating Officer and General Counsel, and then Tiffany Law, our Chief Financial and Technology Officer, to walk us through the three pillars or the three strategic focuses for us to achieve real impact. And by the way, Dennis is our Director of Power Supply. Take it away, Dennis.
Good afternoon, Board. Glad to be here today. Can we bring the slide deck up? So first, I just want to, our goal as adopted by the Board in September was to achieve 60% RPS by 2025, 5 years ahead of the state mandate, and 100% by 2030, about 15 years ahead of the state. So let's look at what we've done to date. Since 2018, we've run several competitive solicitations, and we've signed 14 long-term agreements, approximately about $2 billion in cost commitments over the next 15 to 20 years. As you can see here, the map shows the locations of our different projects. We have 9 solar plus storage projects that are going to be built over the next several years, about 663 megawatts of solar plus about 200 megawatts of energy storage. Combined with that, we have 2 geothermal projects, and as Beth mentioned, we are one of the only 2 of the CCAs that have entered into agreements for geothermal. Geothermal serves a great base load renewable power. It's not as intermittent as wind or solar is. And in addition, we have a solar project only, Atlas Solar, that's going to provide us a lot of power. And the last one I want to call out, Cow Flats Energy Storage. This is a project in Monterey County, and it just achieved commercial operation at the end of August. So it was a big achievement, and 3CE played a large role in getting that built. So we're looking forward to working with the developer of that project to help us out with meeting our energy procurement requirements. So where are we at with regard to our long-term goal? By the end of 2022, about 400 megawatts of our projects will be online, and about 120 megawatts of the energy storage, and steadily increasing over 23 and 24, so that by early 23 we'll have hit our 60% target. And so that's really good news that we've already done what we need to do to hit our intermediate goal of 60% by 2025. So the question is, how do we get to 100%? And I want to just talk a little bit about sort of the state that's been talked about a little bit in earlier presentations. Is the main takeaway from this slide is you're going to see a lot more solar and wind pushing out the conventional sources of power over the next 20 years. That's what we want. But there are some short-term challenges that we need to address. And I apologize in advance for any feathers I ruffle, because I'm going to talk about the duck curve, which has already been hinted at here. And I know that some people may be tired of talking about the duck. But it's really core to kind of our future plan to get to where we need to be. Just real briefly, right? This curve is called the net load curve. It's the consumption going on after it's been served by the wind and solar. They take it out because it's as available. It's not controllable or dispatchable. So this is what the grid manager has to manage. And just want to point out a couple things. The duck belly, the bottom there, what that means to us is that we're likely to see low prices and potential curtailments of our solar generation that we have under contract. So that's not a good thing. The duck neck is when that solar is tapering off and the conventional powers are ramping up. And that's a challenge for the grid manager, but what it means to us is volatile prices that are occurring, and it makes it hard for us to plan and budget for. So those are, the duck curve is a problem, and it's a challenge for us. And the question is, what do we do to mitigate the effects of the duck curve? And they have a term they talk about, it's called teach the duck to fly. And that's what we're going to be focusing on as we contract for more renewable power. And so, here's the visual showing the duck as a shallower belly, so less overgeneration risk, and then the neck of the duck is flatter. So there's more stability in the marketplace. There's less price volatility. So what are we going to do? We've determined that, I think I skipped one here. No, I guess not. So what we've determined is that really storage is the answer to that question of I think it was referred to by Doug Snyder as firming up our renewable supply. We need to basically be able to shift the energy that we're getting from our renewable sources, wind and solar, into those periods of our consumption, of our customer consumption, whether it's the morning peak or the evening peak. So our goal is to really deploy and install a lot more batteries throughout our territory. And just to talk about what we are currently doing right now to meet that objective is we have two efforts, the local renewable energy storage RFP and then the local energy storage resiliency RFQ that we're running. I'll talk about those briefly. Is in January we issued an RFP for local resources had to be sited within our service area, and we shortlisted 4 projects. And one project is a solar plus storage project, 100 megawatts of solar, 50 megawatts of energy, and then 3 different projects for standalone energy storage. As Tom mentioned, that's really an important component of how we intend to get to 100% renewable power. We're currently negotiating with these 3 developers, and we hope to complete those negotiations in the next month or 2 and be able to bring them to the operations board for approval. If we're successful, that will add, bring our fleet of batteries from 261 megawatts to 361 megawatts, and for the solar we go from 783 to 883. So we're really growing the fleet, and batteries is an integral component of that. The second effort we have underway was issued in June, and what we are looking for is partners to install up to 100 megawatts of standalone energy storage, 1 to 5 megawatts inside throughout our service area. We actually received a lot of developers, 18 developers submitted as part of this request for qualifications, and we're currently refining the process and hope to get more information out soon about how that process is going to work going forward. But we plan to spend the next 2 years working to contract for about 100 megawatts of small scale energy storage to help us with this objective. And that concludes my presentation. We plan to do more renewable solicitations on top of the energy storage efforts that we currently have underway, and stay tuned. And thank you.
Great job. We'll take questions at the end. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Rob.
Thank you, Chair McShane, Chair Palacios, members of the Operations and Policy Board, and those tuning in as well. If we could leave the slides up, thank you. So I want to talk a little bit today. Dennis got to talk a little bit about the power procurement and the planning and the challenges we have at the broad level. I want to talk about climate solutions at the local level and what we're doing through electrification. And it will tee up, I think, a little bit about what Tiffany's going to talk about with respect to how data and customer data and empowering customers is going to be such an important part as we move forward. Let me begin, if I can, by just thanking those people on my staff for all the work that they've done in putting this together, because it's been a tremendous amount of work. So J.R. Killigrew and his staff of Lena Williams and Peter Berridge have done a tremendous amount of work. John Greaser, coming in the middle of early last spring, has been tremendous in adding vision and structure to our energy programs and getting them rolled out along with the CAC members. And I want to welcome back to the CCA family Hillary Staver, whose first day was Monday of this week as our Director of Regulatory and Legislative Affairs. We were able to steal her from the sidelines after her time at Silicon Valley. And she's coming in to work with Brian Kimball and help make sure that we're engaging all of our legislative delegation in solutions moving forward. So the presentation today is going to talk about accomplishments, what we've been able to do in electrification over the last few years. I really want to paint a picture moving forward for you about what that's going to look like in the future, how we're going to engage customers, all customers, making sure that programs are available even to customers that are in underserved communities. I want to talk about how we can maximize our member agency interaction and participation in our programs and in our operations. I want to challenge and encourage all of you to be thinking about what you can provide as member agencies. And I'll give you a little bit of a framework. One, internally, you all have fleets. You all have operations for maintaining your fleets. Can we electrify? How can we help you do that? Externally, you all pass ordinances. You have the potential to do reach codes, to be able to push electrification instead of by single consumers making decisions to make changes, by setting standards in the code to get people there quicker. And then your staffs as well. Well, before I leave staff, let me just say your other external piece is your leverage. We want to be able to leverage our relationships with member agencies because you already have established all of those outreach channels and all of that infrastructure to engage small and local businesses. You already have structures through your health and human service departments to engage your underserved communities. And then you all have your own staffs as well. I remember in my time in public agency, we all have those internal website pages that have all of the little things that staff can take advantage of, whether it's gym memberships or otherwise. We want to see our programs there as well because you have thousands of employees that should be driving electric cars, putting chargers in their homes, looking for opportunities to electrify. This is what we've done. This is our program portfolio. There have been others that have been designed and not launched. There have been some that have changed or completed and fallen off. But taking the idea that an energy program portfolio needs to stand over time to have real impact, these are the programs that I want to talk about. And they're color-coded there. We're really going to talk about transportation. That's the huge amount of carbon emissions in transportation. We're going to talk about new construction and existing building. There is a huge challenge with existing building to make decisions and move electrification because that's where individual homeowners need to think about their own energy uses, their own demands, their own challenges and finances. And then we also have our inventories internally, our reach codes, things that we're doing to support member agencies in a very sort of formal policy standpoint. And again, I want to invite us to go beyond formal policy standpoints and how we can get all of you to start adopting electrification as well. And then our electrification and education grant program, which was awarded, I'm going to talk about in a little bit, this summer for the first time. I see Tessa Tobar in the back there has been a big part working with the CAC members to make this a successful first iteration of that program. We'll have a second iteration coming up this year. But let's talk about what we accomplished. And we can go through each of these programs and talk about statistics. Statistics are important. 40 ag decisions, 40 different projects moving to electrification, that's important. A huge increase in terms of the number moving 200% from one program year to the next shows tremendous demand, and that's important. But what I really want to think about is how is this impacting our communities? We have some of our largest agricultural operations, Tanamura and Antle, who are already sustainable minded, that are looking for opportunities to do that one additional project. How can we go one further? Is there an opportunity to do something we weren't thinking about or planning for? And they've done that. We've seen people move, whether it's electric tractors, moving to electric irrigation pumps or harvesting equipment. And that's been really impactful. But we're more than just the statistics and the numbers. We have to think as well, these farms are employers and their families as well. So I want to talk a little bit about the impacts on small businesses. So an Adam Winery in Watsonville is a company, and I have a little story here because I've seen it. I live in South Santa Cruz County as well. This old diesel forklift that they would move their grapes inside, it was in the back of their tasting room, and it would fill their tasting room with these emissions, this particulate nastiness, and it would shut down operations anytime that they needed to do something. So it changed their operation entirely. They were able to take advantage of the program to get an electric forklift, and I'll share with you just my 5-year-old and Chris Pedreas here are the two most happiest people I've ever seen to sit on a forklift because it changed his operation. It changed the way he was running his business. It changed his ability to look at growing his business. Similarly, in Aptos, again, Santa Cruz County, I don't know what an electric rake is. There are pictures of them here. But changing a small family business for harvesting olive oil or olives for olive oil, being able to bring in electric harvest equipment, and both of these customers, when we talk with them and the large customers, whether it's Triangle Farms or others, what they tell us is it's about growing and operating our business in line with our values. And that's the impact that you are all having whenever you put this together and you approve our programs. Talking about transportation electrification, and I really, again, want to thank John for his vision in saying, yes, an electric vehicle incentive program is the right thing to do. Let's get to the board. Let's get the money. Let's stand that up. But also saying, we have this residential electrification program that's being underutilized. Let's tie these two things together. If you're getting an electric car, you're going to want a place to charge that. So let's start advertising them together. Let's start taking advantage of the promotions and the discussions that are happening around these. So John made that change, and we saw a big change, a lot of uptake. And again, the statistics are important. 300 electric vehicles, 90 chargers, that's important. One of the things I want to note is 32 income qualified EVs. That's 10%. That's not enough. Now, we've been working with other entities, and some of our grant recipients, like Ecology Action and Regeneration, are doing a lot of education around EVs. They're doing a lot of ambassador programs that get out to underserved communities. But we need to work closer together. Think about design. Think about how we should be structuring our programs to make them effective for underserved communities. And there's a lot of reasons why 10% could be a good number in one respect, might not be enough in another respect. But it's a starting point, and we need to improve upon it. Just to think about, again, impacts. Small business owner in San Luis Obispo City. He was looking to move to an electric vehicle, but COVID changed his finances. And I think anyone that owns a small business probably knows that your personal finances and your business finances really go hand in hand when you're a true small business. So he said, this was my COVID relief. My business was in a spot where I wasn't going to be able to make this transition. I really wanted to do it. This is what helped me get there. When we talk about Patricia in Santa Cruz County, she was able to level various incentives together, take advantage of our incentive as an income qualified customer to get into an EV. So she's one of those 32 income qualified customers that were able to take advantage of it. I'm really looking forward to what this program offers next year, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment too. The Cal EVIP, you may have heard a lot about it. We've put $7 million into charging equipment in our Monterey Bay area. And one of those charging equipments is at the Regional Waste Management District. Building electrification, again, these numbers are important. One of the things that I want to talk about in terms of new construction is this is eliminating greenhouse gas emissions from day one. The construction is not being built with gas. Look at the number of affordable housing units. 1,100 affordable housing units in our service area. Over 1,500 units total built that are all electric, that have been incentivized with our program. And I want to thank Dan Bertoldi and the planning departments in Santa Cruz County and Monterey County, because we also had, and it was mentioned earlier, a fire victim response program. So we've got 12 houses that were built that were fire rebuilds, where people were looking for an opportunity to make the right decision and rebuild without gas. Chispa is our first project that's been delivered, and it was just delivered. And I will take the opportunity, because we would not be good public servants if we did not find an opportunity for all of you to wear construction hats with suits for photo opportunities. So I'll find that opportunity for you in the future. Our electrification grant awardees, these are the ones that were selected with the help of the CAC. I want to thank Mike Termini, Katie Davis, and Brandon O'Rourke in working with staff to evaluate all of these proposals. The ones that are starred are EV outreach and education, and they were combined. So those entities are all going to be working together to try to educate and point low-income customers in particular and customers at large to EV incentives. In the South Central Coast, this program, we have $12 million in terms of joint funding that's going towards the South Central Coast project. 3 minutes is what it took to get all of that money reserved. So I think all of the fast chargers are totally reserved. Everything has been funded for. So I want to note, multiple funding partners, a lot of advertising builds up a lot of demand, and also midstream, there are people that build chargers that are out there talking to property owners and saying, there's a program that's there for you. It's waiting for you. If you want to do this, let's take advantage. And that's something that we want to be able to replicate moving forward, is that midstream opportunities. I want to talk about the Summer Readiness Pilot Program. This is a program where the CPUC came to us, all LSEs, and said, we need your help trimming demand when the grid is stressed the most. And I'll tell you, I don't like this type of program. This type of program may not work. There's a lot of debate on this, but I'll tell you this. We incentivize customers to trim their electricity, large industrial customers that had load. And we did it because, one, we wanted to be responsive. We wanted to be a good grid partner, but we wanted to learn from it as well. So that when the commission comes back and says, this is what we need you to do, we have data to be able to show that, maybe load shaping or load modification programs are going to be better than a true demand response sort of trim program. The other thing that this has been really tremendous on is getting that communication with customers. So we're constantly following up with customers, including all of our member agencies, about were they able to respond? What were the limitations? Where's the opportunity to electrify other parts of your equipment and build in flexibility for these high stress periods? I do want to cap and just think about legislative outcomes from the last year. And I know I'm running short on time, but let me say this. You heard Senator Laird talking about AB 525. Don't worry about what's up on the screen, but I want you to think of this. You think of 525, think of an alternative complementary generation profile. Offshore wind looks different, and all those graphs that Nick Pappas and Dennis showed, it's not at the same time as solar, so it helps us deal with the duck curve. Think about local jobs. Think of on-site development and investment in our local economies. For local bioenergy, think about organic waste diversion. Think about opportunities to build microgrids with those critical facilities at wastewater and sanitation facilities. AB 1110, think about incentives to help public agencies rapidly transform their fleet. SB 68, think about assistance in getting reach codes and planning decisions so that you can make those hard to get gains around residential electrification and make them attainable. And then this is a quick summary of just everything that we've done in the customer outreach profile for the last year. And what I really want to talk about in a few slides is building customer resources. And that's what's going to be becoming important. Our customer energy portal and our rate comparison tools. I'll touch on this briefly, our field promotions. When we talk about underserved communities, meeting them where they are, we can't expect that people that are working shift work, that have children that they have to pick up, are going to be able to meet us even in a Zoom room at a time and date set by us. We need to go where they are to get them the message. This is a tremendous program that JR put together in connection with Tricolor and Lelea in the South Service area to get out and actually meet farm workers in the fields to talk about 3CE and clean energy. Take a quick breath and back at it. So I'm going to try to be very quick as we walk through this next piece, which is where are we going? This is the goal, right? Dennis mentioned it. We want to reduce GHG emissions to 50% compared to 2020 levels by 2030. We got to get there through our procurement. We've got to get there through our programs that we implement, and we need each of you as member agencies to help us do that. We also want to do it in obtaining 100% customer satisfaction. 100% is not an easy goal to set for oneself, but we're going to do this by ensuring a good customer experience from a billing standpoint, putting programs that customers can take advantage of, engage with customers in a way that is meaningful so that they can all take advantage of programs. We want to work with member agencies to have a big impact early on. And we want to constantly be engaging, both with member agencies and with you. I'm so glad that Beth shared her monthly newsletter with you. And Leora at CalCCA shares a lot of information. I get questions from many of you about what are other CCAs doing. CalCCA's webpage is a wonderful resource about everything that CCAs are doing, from procurement to programs to their outreach structures. Our portfolio for the next year, there's a lot here. You're going to get numbers and details about this tomorrow. There's a portfolio summary in tomorrow's packet for the policy board. There's a lot here, but as we think about this, it's really about complementary programs, and it's about changing the way that we're structuring and thinking about programs. So we want to be actively engaging. You all have gotten an invitation about front-of-the-meter batteries. You'll be getting an invitation to start working with us more substantively in terms of fleet electrification, other kind of big picture problems. We want to think about how we're designing programs. We want to think about the data that we're collecting so that we can change the way programs are running. And then in terms of how we're talking with customers, again, I'm going to use it in a different context of meeting customers where they are. Some customers need to be told what electrification is and why electrification is the right thing to do. Some customers just need to know, how are you going to help me get? I know it's the right thing to do, but I'm not financially there yet. How do I get there? How do we incentivize them? Sometimes that's us. Sometimes that's a reach code. Sometimes it's a planning ordinance that says if you're going to approve a subdivision in a high fire risk area, maybe you require an islanded microgrid as part of it. And then there are other customers that said, okay, I did it. Now prove to me it was the right thing. How did it change the way I use electricity? How did it change the value that I'm getting from 3CE? And what excites me about member agencies is that you all get back in line. Once you fix one problem, you say, okay, what's next? And then I want to invite you to be part of the process, engaging around each of those problems. so that we can be on this merry-go-round, both as member agencies and your CCA, but also with customers as well. Customer outreach over the next year, it's really about exactly what I've been talking about. We want to increase participation. We've got these huge enrollments that are occurring. We've got to make sure that we keep those customers in terms of the enrollment process. And I want to thank Das Williams and Kyle Richards and Joan Hartman for helping us in terms of our outreach efforts around the enrollments. But these are those goals, and we want to invite customers that have left us to come back. Now this slide has a lot going on. I don't know that it's going to be our final slide on this topic, but Beth mentioned it, and let me talk about it, which is supplier diversity. Now, so Beth talked about the Commission's requirements and about Prop 209 and the limitations of public entities, and I just want to say that you all have addressed this. You thought about this, and you passed our local preference policy in June, and we talked about it last year in the fall as well. And as part of that, we set up a vendor registry. In terms of our outreach, we want to be able to collect information on every small, local, disadvantaged business in our service territory, so that when we send out an RFP, no matter what it's for, I don't care if it's for pens or for solar panels or for an offshore wind facility, we want our local vendors to have an opportunity to bid on that first. We want them to have an opportunity to get to those local dollars. Now, the decision in the conversation that we had a year ago was, what's more important? Filling out the CPUC spreadsheet. I'm so happy, Beth, to hear about a workshop to get a new spreadsheet that's specific to CCAs. Is that important? Or is what's important ensuring local impacts, local jobs, local creation? This vendor registry tool is the first step to that. We want to identify and break down barriers for small, local, disadvantaged businesses. You all, maybe not all, but a lot of public entities have these sort of vendor registration platforms. We'll be looking to partner so that we can populate this more quickly. We'll encourage people to get signed up with the CPUC clearinghouse, but what we really want to do is also help those small businesses graduate out of the definition of small and grow to medium-sized businesses. So this is an area that over the next few years we'll be coming back to again and again with program ideas of how can we incentivize small businesses to move beyond that category. Customer resources and tools. This is a very exciting area. Lena Williams and her staff has been working tirelessly on this. Tiffany, if I stop talking, is going to talk quite a bit about this. We want to harness customer data. We want to create we have created, it'll be rolled out later this year, a customer portal where it's self-service. They can go in, they can make decisions, they can see their energy use. They can start to see information, and in the future we'll design programs around customer energy uses. We'll provide program options for particular customers. We'll look at that midstream opportunity where instead of a pay and chase program incentive platform, we'll have an area because we'll be able to engage distributors of ag equipment and heat pump hot water heaters directly at the point of sale. And we'll work with other CCAs to build those sorts of platforms. Regulatory proceedings over the next year, there's so many more beyond these ones. I shared these ones because they're not huge market delivery structures and economics, but I shared them because where do they plug into programs? Where are the changes we need in the regulatory place to make programs really be more effective moving forward? That front-of-the-meter battery storage program that is a procurement side, we want to work with all of you to find opportunities to build community microgrids where that front-of-the-meter battery can serve in the event of an outage multiple critical facilities on a campus structure, similar to what Redwood Coast and Matt's daughter were able to accomplish up north. And then I just want a final statement here in terms of we can't do this first without you and your leadership, but we can't do it without our team either. And I'm co-opting, just so that we have it here, what Human Resources is going to be working on over the next few years as well, which starts actually tomorrow, as we'll be looking at a personnel policy system to help engage, recruit, and keep engaged our key employees. Thank you very much. I know that was very quick. I'm happy to take questions. At a future time, you can all call me, and I'll turn it over to Tiffany Law.
Good afternoon, everyone. And it's my pleasure to share with you how harnessing data analytics will achieve excellence in customer service. As shared by Rob, our 5-year strategic plan for our community is about our commitment to bring value to our customers in the communities where we serve. And we work to engage through outreach, customer responsiveness, consistent and reliable service, education, and delivering energy programs that reduce greenhouse gas emissions, promote electrification, and benefit our customers. And our goal is to achieve 100% of customer satisfaction by implementing a strategy to improve access to our customer data so that we can enhance our ability to customize energy programs that would address customers' needs and promote clean energy and electrification programs. And to achieve such strategy, we will take actions to implement a full-scale data analytic platform, integrate our customer relationship management system, which the data analytic platform, and to build useful dashboards for key metrics. Let me share with you about our accomplishments in 2021. And before I start, I want to recognize Owen Lee, our Director of Finance, and Max Byrne from Luncheon, our platform developer, for their tremendous efforts to successfully complete the development of a beta testing cloud-based data analytics platform in April 2021. What we did was we developed full pipelines for CCCE's largest sources of PG&E's raw data, including historical interval data, monthly billing and customer account data, weekly customer account data, daily system wholesale load data, and daily customer billing data. And we also integrated customer information, wholesale load data from Gridas, our data manager for PG&E service area. We also developed initial dashboards tools to access the data. In many cases, there is not a single source of data for a data need. Therefore, our platform has to put puzzle pieces together from various sources to see the full picture. In this example, to see and understand customer load patterns from the historical period to today, we have to combine PG&E's historical interval data from item 17 report with their current interval data from Share My Data report, and then we have to shape in loads from customers who do not have the interval meters in order to understand the total system load. We also successfully set up the initial machine learning models that incorporate weather data to forecast future usage in our beta testing data analytic platform. Our next step is to include more econometric and industry data, such as population growth trends, employment rate and type, electrical vehicle usage, solar panel installations, etc. CCCE lives in a big data world where our customers generate over 7 million data points every day. This would require us to have the ability to process massive amounts of data and the intelligence to find connections between various points of data to inform business decisions. In addition, harnessing data analytics is critical to meet our agency's goals of reducing greenhouse gas through local control of renewable energy generation at competitive rates and development of innovative energy programs. For example, how does California Department of Vehicles information on EV registrations change my residential customers' load patterns? Can weather and radiance data from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration help project the system load profile for the next day to better inform the market transactions CCCE engage in? In the full-scale data analytic platform, we want to continue to work towards providing a highly flexible and scalable data environment that gives our teams the ability to access to centralized, current, accurate and secure data that allows for the powerful analysis required of them and is able to adapt to future requirements. The platform will be integrated with our customer relationship management system, which has stored our customer load profiles, customer invoice tracking, rate comparison results, and tracking with which programs customers has participated in. We will also build dashboards for customized key metrics. For example, for the power supply department, their dashboards will show forecast system load, purchase power, and hedge contract tracking, KAISO market price curves. For the finance department, their dashboards will show rates, costs, and revenue projections. For communication and outreach and energy program departments, their dashboards will show energy program participation and success tracking, key account summary, and opt-out tracking. And for the regulatory and legislative department, their dashboards will show legislative bill tracking. To meet the goals from the previous slides, we are working with cloud technology to provide a tool that is flexible, powerful, scalable, and secure. This slide illustrates a dashboard for system load information key metrics, for example. The cloud-based platform is multifaceted and contains various interconnected parts that meet the requirements for data transformation, storage, analysis, and accessibility. This platform is being built from the ground up for CCCE using a collaborative approach with internal teams and an industry expert. This approach will result in a product that is owned and operated by us, but will continue to have the support from the third-party platform developer as needed. This slide illustrates the overview of the data platform. It features data tools for pipelines that gather key data sources, scalable and centralized cloud-based storage, machine learning tool to provide forecasts, and anomaly detection and improved data insights, an analysis server that provides data analytics, data portal, reports, and dashboards. By using this platform, our internal teams can achieve the goals listed on here. Finally, the main objectives of developing our own full-scale data platform are to allow us to host all the IOU's raw data, to create revenue forecasting scenario modeling, to generate load data that can be cross-referenced with the data that our scheduling coordinator has submitted to KAISO every day, to create a more user-friendly interface, to build an interdepartmental data bridges, and to decrease our dependencies on our data managers for ongoing regular requests and internally managing data relationships. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tiffany. We want to allocate some time for board members, as it relates to this series of presentations. And so we would just encourage that. I know there was a lot thrown at us, and I know there's been a lot of interest in many of these topics. But truly we got a lot going on, and we're doing it. So why don't we start here in this room, and we'll go ahead with the raise of hands for questions. I see the chair of our CAC, Norm Groot. So why don't we go ahead and recognize you first, and then we'll just open it up to anybody else here, and then we'll go on to Zoom. Norm.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it, Chair McShane. I really appreciate Mr. Shaw's thorough review of the energy programs that we have as a community aggregate organization put together, and the success that we are achieving within the community on those programs. And I think you saw a lot of the details, particularly in some of the vehicle and ag programs that are really oversubscribed and really sell out quickly. And I think it's important to recognize how much work goes into developing those programs. And this year, the CAC took a little different approach, and we decided that we are really going to dive into this, first of all, by asking the community what their needs are and what they wanted to see in programs and what was most important to them, and then gathering all that information. And we asked Mr. Habashi to appoint an ad hoc committee of the CAC to really sift through all those requests, all that information, all the suggestions, and really help to prioritize and really put some numbers and analysis on those programs. And there was a lot of work that went into this year, and I think you'll see that with the programs that we're introducing as we go forward, how those have been thoroughly thought out and then really put together by staff as they've worked through this. So we have two of our CAC members here today who were part of that ad hoc committee, who met over, I believe, a dozen times on their own to work through this process. And my vice chair, Mr. Seth Capron, was kind enough to lead this ad hoc committee, and then Jeff Byron also participated. And I just wanted to recognize the fact that a lot of your volunteer effort from the CAC was put into these programs and really is showing the success. And we really want to continue that in the future, because that's really what the community is asking for, and that's what they want. So thank you. Appreciate your support.
Thank you for recognizing that, Norm. And, to Jeff and Byron, I know personally Jeff's spending those nights and weekends with Seth on many of the interests as it relates to programs. So we look forward to that. And I know tomorrow there is a report on the agenda. Looking to anybody else here for questions in response to those presentations. Okay. Right here, Doss.
So just one question for Dennis. So essentially, the status of the local storage resiliency project is that we have contractors to build it, but we don't yet have all the sites to locate it. Correct? Is that essentially the status of that?
Well, we're actually, it's less down the road than that. We're still formulating how we're going to interact with the vendors, in addition to the site identification.
And so, of course, my understanding is we're looking for some of us to participate as sites, right? So I don't mind you guys putting that back on us. That we've got a lot of land, we've got a lot of uses that vital facilities that could use a battery backup in the case of emergency, that we don't mind if you discharge every single day to defray load. So just want to make sure that point comes back on us to make this one work.
Just quickly, we've sent letters to all the city managers and all the county administrators, asking them to identify all the locations where they can give us a little bit of a space so we can put battery chargers anywhere between 1 to 5 megawatt. And I've sent it directly to you folks because I know that you can move things along in your city faster than anybody else. I look forward to your answers, and as soon as we do get it, then we will have a portfolio of locations and spots where we can place all those smaller storage units. So please connect with your folks. There's another thing that I was another program that at least I've been talking to my staff about, and soon you'll get another letter inviting you to work with us on. I'd like, knowing that you don't get any federal tax breaks if you buy an electric vehicle, perhaps to put a program together only for our city, for our members, that will give higher incentives from us to you if you would commit to changing, electrifying your fleet. Whether we can do that through, you can do it through an MOU with you, or if you can do it through just a resolution in your city or county, that would be great. But definitely, I would like to see a lot more electric vehicles in your backyards. And I know that's unlikely to happen unless the incentives get a little bit better than just $1,000. Thank you.
Anything else, Doss?
I just had one other question for either Rob or Norm. If our vehicle electrification and our ag electrification, application windows and number of participants are capped, why do we cap those if we want to spend more program funds and these are the more good bang for our buck as far as GHGs are concerned? Why do we cap those?
Yeah, so for the electric vehicle program, we actually extended it quite a bit. So remember last year, We really wanted to give MBARD enough room to run their program and not have them be competitive. We're changing that this year. We're working with MBARD so that the programs can be complementary, but not have to run independently of each other. So that will be changing. And then the ag electrification program, I think, is changing significantly as well. The dollar amount that's available will change significantly. The structure of the program will change significantly. But one of the things that make program incentives work is building in a sense of demand and scarcity around the program as well. We've been really successful, and John and Dan, in terms of outreach independently. That program probably should change. We've got a lot of data now about where that equipment is coming from, what kinds of equipment is the low-hanging fruit. So now it's time to start thinking about where's that midstream point of sale opportunity where the incentive can be built in at the purchase point, and you can have more local economic benefit being driven because you have local suppliers providing those as well. But all of those things are part of program design that as we look out over the next year, John and his team are certainly looking at.
Thank you. Is that all?
I'll wait if there's other people.
Okay, let's just see. Okay, yep, sure, Derek.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman McShane. I just had a quick question for Rob, and just to follow up on a question that came up earlier from the chair. Is just it looks like there's a lot of federal and state funding that's coming down, and our programs are tailored in a particular way. And I just wonder, how are we monitoring the funding that's coming down from the state and federal, and making adjustments, I guess, in real time, because I know it's a pretty dynamic environment. Just as managing a city, we're seeing funding streams come forward and then trying to make those adjustments, and just love to hear from Rob your perspective on that.
I think there's certainly a matter of a very fast-paced environment. We rely quite a bit on CalCCA looking at state budget options. I think a big area, and Beth talked about it, this isn't really a program, but in terms of COVID response relief, trying to avoid shutoffs as that moves forward, it's something that, it is our entire organization has to be geared and ready to respond to. So all of those different funding structures, when they become available, what the deadlines are, we rely on CalCCA. Certainly, Brian Kimball has been a big part of that, and Hillary Staver will be a big part of it moving forward. In terms of program design, one of the things that make us nimble and flexible is that the policy board approves the program budget. Within the program budget, we share with you the portfolio, but staff has the ability to make decisions, come back to the board within that budget to be able to change program design as necessary. John's direction in terms of saying this home residential electrification program is being underutilized. Let's tie it to EV chargers because we know that there's demand there. That flexibility is really important so that we can continually find that demand. And then I think also moving forward, engaging with member agencies around this sort of thing. Some member agencies are at one end of the scale where they know they have a CCA, but they don't know necessarily what to do with it. Other member agencies are at the cutting edge of being kind of progressive and climate forward and thinking about where they want to go. There are a number of member agencies that are in the middle that are saying, we're doing a lot of different things. We want to make sure that they're the right things. How do we get there? We want to bring everybody at least to the middle, and we want to work with those people that are at the progressive end to help us do that. And these questions about funding, what's available, working together, understanding what your constraints are and funding opportunities, as Tom was mentioning, just fleet programming. We need to think about designing programs so that we can have a big impact by enabling counties and cities to be able to change their fleets and not be restricted by a budget year or a procurement cycle. So those are all things that flexibility is how we respond to it.
Okay, thank you.
Just one more
follow up, sure.
If I may, this is either for Ms. Vaughn or Dennis. I'm just interested, curious, and I gotta say, the presentations have been fascinating, very educational. Hats off to the team for all the work that's gone into this. I'm trying to, is there a forecast for what it looks like to teach the duck to fly, so to speak? Is that
I get to take this off. Wow. So I think that goes directly to what Nick was talking about as well in his analogy, right? Is we've got these targets and we make the airplane fly, didn't use that, and then we have to land it, which is SB 100. I thought it was a very good analogy. And I think what we're really struggling with right now is, do we put all our eggs in one basket, on the duck analogy, right? This storage has been such a focus, and we're looking at emerging technologies. It's why I think geothermal is so important, and certainly in the integrated resource plan, in this midterm reliability ruling that came out, they're looking at geothermal. They're looking at efforts, maybe like pump storage. You know, Eagle Crest is still out there. San Vicente is an option down in San Diego area, and so some of it's actually it's not that locational when you're looking at baseload resources like that. But the question is do you get in front of that technology? I mean, there's been a lot of discussion now because they've had the problems with the batteries there at Moss Landing that Senator Laird talked about, right? Vistra, isn't it? I think that's part of the concern is you showed on your diagram, the storage, that's what we're looking to get that belly of the duck up. On the other hand, we need to be also looking at other types of technology. And I know, Tom, with the work you've been doing with CC Power, that was part of the RFO that went out, and even the RFI before that, request for interest, was to find out what is the emerging technology that's coming down the line. What should you be looking at investing in, say, maybe not today, but 5 years from now? So that's one of my, do you want to have a go?
Dennis, anything to add, or should we keep going? I just want to be mindful of time. Okay, she nailed it. You did great, Beth. Okay, let's just take it to Zoom real quick. I'm just looking up there to see if we have any hands raised. Just press the hand raise function so I can see you. Okay. Yep, okay, so is that Jamie first we'll go with? Yeah, Jamie, I think, okay, there you go. So Jamie Goldstein, floor is yours.
Thank you all. That was a great presentation we got this afternoon. Really appreciated all the information. I think the one real interesting point that one of the really interesting points I heard today was Nick Pappas' presentation when he outlined kind of the 3 different scenarios for how 6 neighbors could solarize their homes. And one of the things I think is going to be a really interesting challenge for us moving forward is how do we as a CCA find a way to put that opportunity for those 6 individuals to do exactly what Nick was describing, was find a way to jointly put solar panels in together in some way that is cost effective and equitable. Because right now we don't really have the option to give them that $26,000 option that I think he described. But moving forward, I think that'd be a really exciting opportunity for us to explore further. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there one other one?
Marianne.
Oh, there she is. Okay, yep. Thank you, Mary. Thank you. Marianne Carbone.
Yes, I just wanted to mention when you spoke about climate solutions, local level, and fleets, how can we help to electrify different agencies or leverage to help engage with the underserved? I serve on the MST board, Monterey Salinas Transit, and we just we are in the process of building 2 new bus stations or maintenance buildings. So we have one in the Ryan Ranch area, and we're just building one down in South County. With the greenhouse gas, with the going to eliminating greenhouse gas, and with mandates for electrification with vehicles, is there a way of putting battery storage in, say like some of these new buildings, or where they are going to house electrified buses?
So battery storage as it relates to buses, transportation, industrial.
Yeah, thank you, Chair McShane and Director Carbone. I think absolutely those are the types of opportunities that we would want to look at first as part of our front-of-the-meter battery opportunity, and then also as technology and the regulatory environment change, that vehicle-to-grid integration opportunity. Electric buses already have a tremendous amount of battery storage within them. Is there an opportunity to maximize that both for the customer and for 3CE and our customers at large? So those are wonderful opportunities.
Yeah, thank you. Good point. Okay, I just want to round it out here. I have one last question for Dennis, and that relates to the RFQs that 18 developers responded to on the 1 to 5 megawatt level. I know we've talked about this. I think the agency in past years did a similar RFQ exercise. This is hard because you just don't get the bang for the buck when you have to manage all these little itsy bitsy, so to speak, generation. So maybe can you just speak to that? Like, what is our strategy there? And are we really gonna move forward with 100 megawatts at that scale?
Do you want? I mean, I'm happy to. I mean, it is going to be a challenge, but I think there's some encouraging signs out there. There's a program that PG&E recently released that allows us to potentially collaborate with them on making small-scale batteries more beneficial for the site host and for this front-of-the-meter installations that we're looking to do. And so we fully plan to explore that and work closely with PG&E to see if we can make that a reality as part of this program.
And maybe just as a quick follow-up, time frame. You didn't really have a definitive. When's this going to happen? Is it by Christmas or
we're still
like a
trying
year
to
from
refine
now?
the timing, but we plan to have sort of semi-annual or quarterly solicitations for bits and pieces of that 100 megawatts. So we go after them sequentially, and we can learn from the process as we go forward, and so that we can be more successful with all the installations that we plan to do.
Yeah,
the goal, Mr. Chairman, is to go for 25 megawatt every 6 months, so we can get 100 megawatt within 2 years.
Hey, thanks very much. And I know it's a lot to manage, but that local and small scale generation has a place. Very good. Okay, thank you. I want to thank everybody for the good questions, and just bringing it back around. We do need to open it up for public comment, and then Doss will take us home. Okay, so public comment at this time. I know there was at least a dozen of folks tuned in, and there may be folks in the audience. So why don't I start with the audience? If there's any member of the public that would like to speak, we'll limit it to 2 minutes. At this point, any item on the agenda or not on the agenda for that matter, not seeing anybody in the audience. So let's go to Zoom. We may have received written comment as well. So none at this time.
Chair, there's currently no hands raised.
Okay.
Maybe we should ask if anyone would like to use the raise hand function if
That
you
would
do
be
want to
great.
speak.
Okay, yeah, there's quite a board up there. Okay, now's your chance.
Still none, Chair. Thank you.
All right, Shelley, thank you. So, and no received written comments. So with that, this was quite a study session and quite a very lively and helpful, productive meeting. So Vice Chair Doss Williams, what do you have for us to bring us home?
Well, I like to think about when we get presented a lot of information, what does this all mean? And at a more of a gut level. And so I want to take you a little bit back. I'm a convert to community choice aggregators. I'm not here because I think they're inherently good. I'm not here because I even, care that much about energy choice. I don't. I care about one thing, which is reducing GHGs, right? That is why I'm here. That is why I've come on board. And it was hard at first because, when I was in the state legislature, it was still when the CCA movement was new. A lot of agencies were new because of the ability to buy renewable energy credits and carbon-free attributes. A lot of them lacked a lot of substance, right? To be fair to them, it's hard to have substance in your first year or two of operation. But that almost killed it in the cradle. Nick can tell you, right? Because in the legislature, right, we don't write $3,000 or $4,000 checks per legislator, right? The IOUs do, all three of them, right? So if we show hypocrisy, they will murder us for it, right? We will get killed at the PUC. We will get killed in the legislature for it. And so that's why I think the moves, though difficult that they were last year, was so crucial. The move away from carbon-free attributes and towards procuring the maximum amount of PPAs, long and short-term contracts that we can have for renewables. It is of utmost importance. But substance is also risky, right? I mean, it makes us look in the short run like we're ironically doing less renewables, right? And explaining it to the public is really hard because they think a power content label is like looking at an ingredient list on a cereal box. What you have to tell them, of course, is that, well, actually, it's more like ingredients on a cereal box that you can buy, sugar-free attributes for as a cereal company, or you can buy gluten-free attributes as the cereal company. We've got to explain this, and we've got to be evangelical in our communities about, that we're pushing for substance, and we've got to add some urgency to it. I think we, as board members, can't just show up and vote. I think particularly the debate, no matter which side you were on about programs this summer, really awoke in me the idea, look, we wouldn't have any problem spending all of that program budget just among our agencies, right? If we looked at all the buildings we could electrify, if we looked at all the fleets we could electrify, we would have no problem spending all that money, right? And so I think we've got to work with our general services staff, our facilities people, our city managers, our CEOs of counties, and say, we've got to be closer about what the purpose of 3CE and the purpose of the county and cities that we represent are. And ultimately, it will now mean that through MOUs, we can convert our fleets to electric cars, and 3CE will help us defray that cost at higher than the incentive rate. That will help us spend this and make this program budget more robust. It will also help us make the changes that probably most of us wanted to already make in our own fleets. And let's not stop with just passenger vehicles. There are now trucks that are doable to put in there. So let's not let the, not every motor pool or facilities staffer is ready to move on this, and their management is sometimes even slower. We've got to push them in them, show that we have the tools from. Forklifts. That's right, forklifts.
At wineries.
And then one thing I just hope that we'll think about also for the future to add that substance is, what's the one thing we really didn't talk about today? Like, we've talked about so much good, but one thing that always gets left out in energy discussions is the redhead stepchild, the non-sexy strategy. Energy efficiency, right? And I'll remind us that we are not bound by the same kind of restrictions as IOUs on providing paths for buildings that are below code. And so I hope we will think more about that as an organization. And if our problem is peak times, obviously I support batteries, obviously I support that, but the oldest strategy that's out there, the one that is helped in California so much is still out there. But the problem is that for the past 40 years, all of the money in energy efficiency, $1 billion a year, $1 billion of ratepayer funds a year in energy efficiency has been aimed at only 20% of the building stuff. We can get the other 80% in our service territory. So I'm excited about what we're doing. I'm also excited about what we can do. I think we have the people in this room and on Zoom to make it happen. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Williams. Yeah. I think he's excited. To our customers, to our stakeholders, to our staff, and to our leadership, I think today was great. I hope everybody feels they left the meeting energized and excited. Tomorrow we have a policy board meeting, 9 a.m. We're going to approve a budget. If there's any questions for staff, no better time than now to call or approach staff. But really, more than anything, this is the coolest organization. And we have a great mission and a great road ahead of us. So we'll go ahead and stand adjourned, and we'll be back together as a policy board at 9 a.m. I know Operations Board has a meeting. Thank you.